Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting for Thursday, June 1st, 2023. Happy Pride Month. And we will begin this evening's meeting with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and ceded territory of the Chumash, Tongva, Fernandino, Tataviam, and First Nations on which we are learning, educating, and living. With that, I will invite Ms. Caroline Solberg, who serves as a member of the Burbank Arts and Education Foundation, to lead us in the flag salute. Ms. Solberg.
Please stand. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Solberg. With that, Ms. Quiterio, can we get a roll call at this time?
Member Tabbitt,
Present.
Member Ponser-Kamkar,
Present.
Clerk Agakanian,
Present.
Vice President Weisberg,
Present.
President Ferguson.
Present. That is, so all 5 board members are present, so we do have a quorum, so we are able to proceed with the business of the meeting. We will begin with item number 5, reporting on closed session. The following action was taken on item 3A, which is, I'm just making sure I'm reporting this out right. Is it the employee action? Right, okay. Okay, so the first item, the Board of Education met in closed session and voted to approve the settlement agreement from employee number CL0021-23. That was moved by Dr. Weisberg, seconded by myself, and carried 5-0 with all board members voting to support that, including Tabbitt, Agakanian, and Ferguson, Weisberg, and Ponser-Kamkar. On item 3B, sorry, there are multiples here. On the motion of Board Member Ferguson and seconded by Member Weisberg, based on the board's review in closed session of the findings of fact and the recommendations submitted by the Administrative Hearing Panel, the board accepts the recommendation of the Administrative Hearing Panel to expel student number 960027890 based on violation of Education Codes 48900 sections A1, 48900 sections A2, and 48915 sections A1 and capital A. The board adopts the plan of rehabilitation recommended by the panel with the following modifications, which are none, and that was carried 5-0 with Ms. Tabbitt, Dr. Agakanian, Mr. Ferguson, Dr. Weisberg, and Ms. Ponser-Kamkar all supporting. With that, we will go to item number 6, adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments to the agenda at this time? Seeing none, we'll proceed to item 7, items for future agendas. Do any of my colleagues have any items for future agendas? Seeing none, we will go to item number 8, presentations and recognitions. We will begin by, and I want to thank Ms. Quiterio, who helps me a little bit with the script here, to help make sure that we're recognizing folks. We are going to start today's recognitions by reading off folks who will be retiring from the district. And a few of these are definitely well known to our board colleagues. So first, Laura Bauman, who began her service, who is retiring from Luther Middle School, who began her service on September 17th, Constitution Day, 1991. Wow. Laura Bauman also has served as president of the California School Employees Association, Chapter 674, here in the Burbank Unified School District. So not only has she done her service to this community, but also to her fellow employees. And so we should definitely recognize her. Dana Coburn-Coleman, who's a library coordinator, who began her service at Luther Burbank Middle School on November 1st, 2005. And then Ruthie DeFonso, who is the Senior Administrative Secretary for Administrative Services, who began her service on August 17th, 2004. We certainly wish everyone, each one of those. Ruthie has always been just such a fixture in so much of the work that is technical in nature, that is hard to assemble, that is hard to put together, and she's always done it with such grace, and she's a member of our community. Really wishing her the very best in her retirement. I will certainly miss working with her. With that, we will just again celebrate everybody in their retirement. We wish you the best in the adventures ahead of you. With that, we will go to Dr. Hill, who will introduce new administrators in our school district.
Thank you, President Ferguson. We are excited tonight to introduce 3 brand new administrators into their roles in the district. If we can have the following individuals come up, we'll read a quick bio introduction. First is our new Director of HR, Dr. Saida Valdez. We also have our new Principal of Dolores Huerta, Ms. Robin Hatch. And our new Assistant Principal at Jefferson Elementary, Ms. Tracy Shaw. So I'd like to give a little more background of each of our new administrators. First is Dr. Saida Valdez has been a public school educator for over 25 years. She earned her bachelor's degree in art history with a minor in chemistry at UCLA, go Bruins. Her master's degree in education at Claremont Graduate University, and her doctoral degree in education leadership with an emphasis on urban schools at Cal Poly Pomona. And she just recently completed the Chief Business Officer postgraduate program at USC. That's okay. We're all a team here. It's good competition. That's why I like that. Dr. Valdez has served as an instructional aide, a bilingual elementary teacher, a literacy coach, elementary and middle school principal, assistant director of adult and continuing education, adjunct university professor, and now serves as the new Burbank Director of HR. In all the positions she has held, she has made a commitment to behave as a professional educator that is collaborative, communicates openly and honestly, and maintains a focus on the continuous improvement and learning of all students and adults. Throughout her career, Dr. Valdez has worked to close the achievement gap by nurturing strong parent and community engagement, providing innovative learning experiences for students, all while promoting a culture of equity, collaboration, and support. She is passionately committed to the power and promise of public education as a nexus of community advancement and economic growth. Welcome, Dr. Valdez.
Thank you so much for the privilege of being able to serve here in Burbank. I am the oldest of 10. My parents are immigrants from Zacatecas, Mexico, and they came to this country to provide their future children, little did they know they were going to have 10, an education that they were denied. My dad was only allowed to go to 2nd grade because then he had to start taking care of the crops and animals on their farm, and my mom to 6th grade because in their town they didn't have a junior high or a high school, and they couldn't afford to send her to the nearby town to go to school. So all growing up, all I kept hearing is my brothers and sisters and I, the importance of education and how education really is an opportunity for growth, social, emotionally, economically, etc. And I truly believe that we as educators have the privilege of educating other people's children. And their parents send them to us with the hopes and desires that we hold them to high expectations, that we treat them with kindness, with dignity, respect, and most of all, give our best 100% every day. And I, as a director of human resources, hope that is my goal, to provide our students with the best educators that will hold them to high expectations and treat them with kindness and dignity and respect, and never breach the trust their parents give us. So thank you for the opportunity to serve here in Burbank.
Next, I'd like to give a little background on Ms. Robin Hatch, our new principal at Dolores Huerta Middle School. We are excited to announce Ms. Robin Hatch as the new principal at Dolores Huerta Middle School. Robin was born and raised in Northern California. She attended UC San Diego, majoring in history and minoring in education. She completed her teaching credential and master's at UC Irvine. From there, her first teaching position was at Dolores Huerta Middle School, where she taught 7th and 8th grade history as well as ASB. Her favorite part about teaching ASB was helping her students develop leadership skills to take into their future. After teaching at Dolores Huerta Middle School for 10 years, Robin took her first step into administration as the Title I coordinator at John Muir Middle School. In the 5 years she worked at John Muir Middle School, she oversaw intervention programs and worked to improve school safety. For the last 2 years, Robin has worked as assistant principal at Burbank High School, where she oversaw student services and guidance. In those roles, she has worked tirelessly on behalf of staff, students, and families to create a place where students can learn and enjoy school. When she is not working, Robin likes to watch her children, Abby and Cooper, who are here, play sports, and plan trips with her husband, Scott, who's here as well. Welcome, Robin.
All right. Thank you, President Ferguson, Vice President Weisberg, and the rest of the school board. Thank you, Superintendent Hill, and the rest of the cabinet. I am so excited to start this journey as the principal of Dolores Huerta Middle School. My path has taken me to a variety of schools in Burbank, but it feels like I'm returning home to Huerta. I've learned so much on this journey, and I would like to thank the many principals I've worked for and learned from along the way. Sharon Caseo, Stacy Cashman, Greg Miller, Tom Crowther, and Julie Markison. They have all taught me so much, and I hope I live up to it. For those who don't know me, I'm a hard worker, but I also like to have fun. If we aren't having fun along the way, I don't think the work is worth it. And I want to thank all the different staff members I've worked with throughout the years. They have continued to inspire me to work hard and have fun, and hopefully I've done the same for them. My dream for Dolores Huerta is simple in theory, but will definitely take work. I want to help our teachers work together to use best practice to educate our students. I want to help our school staff to create a safe and fun environment for everyone. This includes everyone from the custodians to the librarian to the cafeteria staff. We all have a role in improving our school. I want to help our students learn as much as they can while at the same time becoming good humans and practicing kindness. If we don't instill the importance of living kind now, how will it become a habit later? Last, I want to thank my family. My husband, Scott, is a wonderful social studies teacher at John Burroughs High School and has always supported me in my work life. My kids are Cooper and Abby. Cooper will be a 3rd grader at William McKinley next year, and Abby will be a 6th grader at Dolores Huerta. I am very excited to be at the same school as her. I'm not so sure she's excited. But as a parent, I'm even more dedicated to making Huerta as good as it can be. Si se puede. Thank you.
Okay, good evening to all. I have the pleasure this evening of introducing our new assistant principal at Thomas Jefferson Elementary School, Ms. Tracy Shaw. Ms. Shaw has worked with the Burbank Unified School District community for 17 years. She began as a classroom teacher in 2005, having worked at Stevenson Elementary, Miller Elementary, and Hart Elementary. Having changed schools allowed her to teach at different grade levels. More recently, Ms. Shaw has served as the interim curriculum specialist at Hart, Roosevelt, and most recently, she's completing a 2-year term as the curriculum specialist at Thomas Edison Elementary School. Having worked at multiple schools within the school district has provided her the opportunity to learn the uniqueness of each school and learn about the culture of each school. So it's really a great experience. And also having to work with multiple principals too has given her that opportunity too. Ms. Shaw has a background in Kagan engagement strategies, Project GLAD, systemic ELD, Step Up to Writing, thinking maps, and GATE strategies, among other learnings. Ms. Shaw has also served as a mentor teacher in the induction program. She holds a bachelor's degree in Pan-African Studies and a master's degree in educational leadership from California State University, Northridge. She has a California multiple subject teaching credential and an administrative credential. Ms. Shaw has her children who also attend the Burbank Unified Schools, and her husband works in the education field. So with that breadth of knowledge and experience, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Ms. Tracy Shaw.
Good evening. I did not get a chance to write anything, so I'm just going to be speaking off the cuff, but thank you for having me this evening. I'm really looking forward to this new journey ahead of me and learning a new school site and new kids and new staff. Each one of my experiences has really pushed me to grow and become a better educator, parent, teacher, colleague, and I'm really looking forward to this journey, so thank you.
comments from board colleagues? Ms. Tappett.
Well, congratulations on your new positions and welcome to Burbank. Just on a side note, MUSD 1999 through 2012, I taught at Macy. Yeah, surprise! So welcome. I hope you love being in Burbank as much as I love being here. Robin, Ms. Shaw, Mrs. Hatch. Mrs. Shaw, congratulations. I know both of you. I'm looking forward to getting to know you, but I know that you'll both do a wonderful job, and we're very lucky to have you here in Burbank, so thank you.
Dr. Weisberg.
Just a huge congratulations. It's really exciting to see 3 strong women with so much diverse experience. I will try to forget, I just found out some breaking news about you that you're a Giants fan.
It's true.
Nobody's perfect. That's okay. Let's go.
No, worse, San Francisco. I like you anyway, which is important. But
Which is
to all 3 of you, but I'll forgive it because as a fellow middle school history teacher,
We got to stick together.
got you. But for all 3 of you, I kept taking notes as everyone's bios were being read. There's so many exciting things to follow up on. I'm going to reach out and hopefully sit down with everybody just to hear about how amazing you are. But I hope you'll reach out to us because we're here to support you in everything that you do. And I really look forward to working with all 3 of you next year and beyond. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Agakanian.
Well, you got me all excited. I think I'm the only Armenian who's a New York Giants fan. Me and Barbara Miller. Hi, Barbara. Sorry.
Anyway,
Yeah,
okay.
I know.
it's okay.
Sorry.
We got a meeting, folks.
Again, I want to congratulate all of you as well, but also what I love is the diversity here and the experience as well. That's really what Burbank is about, you know. So I want to make sure that you understand that we're here to support you, but also I'm very excited, you know, to see individuals who've really gone through some difficult times to make it in the education field. I come from a big family too, and it always, you know, I'm always happy to see individuals who, you know, have worked hard and know the value of education. So congratulations and welcome to your new positions. Thank you.
Ms. Ponser-Kamkar.
Thank you. Congratulations. Welcome, Dr. Valdez. Really exciting just for the 3 of you to have just such deep instructional expertise. And that's really super exciting, especially in our school leaders. So I'm really excited about this and what you all are going to bring to your roles in the next year and beyond. And yeah, it's really awesome. So congrats.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, for our 2 veterans who have been in the district for some time, I am thrilled that you've had experience crosstown because I went to Roosevelt Elementary, but then I went to John Muir Middle School. I grew up with a sister who went to Burroughs High School, but I went to Burbank High, and that changed how I connected with my community in real ways. And for you, you all are having access to these young people at very formative times in their lives where they are developing connections with their community, and it's important to be able to demonstrate knowledge of resources across town because that may be what connects them to an educational path that keeps them there. So I'm very excited for that depth that Ms. Ponser-Kamkar referenced. Ms. Hatch, to see your journey, frankly, just in my time as a board member, we got to know each other through a former colleague on this board, and to see you as a classroom teacher and to see you now, wow, you know, that is a Burbank success story. This is a Burbank success story. These are Burbank success stories now. For our newest member to our district, I'm just so excited that I get to now work with you directly as well, and to really, I think you offered such an incredible family history and motivation for your passion and drive in education, and I'm so thrilled when I hear that because what that means for me is I don't know how that's going to be deployed. How that will be actually operationalized. And that excites me because that is innovation. And in a time when education is so, it's struggling, we get bottom lines all the time, no money, you know. We need innovators right now. We need people who, despite the pressures of the everyday world, defy that and choose to innovate anyway. So to the 3 of you, 3 powerful women that are coming into leadership roles in our community, we should celebrate and just welcome to the BOC family in these new roles. So congratulations to each of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now we have new people to go see at school site, so this is great. Excellent. Okie doke. On to our next item, which I will introduce Dr. Hill on the report on volunteer hours from the Burbank Council PTA.
So it's my pleasure for Lori Little, Burbank Council PTA President, to come up to the microphone and give an update. Looks like she's bringing some colleagues with her as well.
Hi. Happy Pride Month. Y'all know I'm Lori Little, and I am actually technically no longer Burbank Council PTA President.
Formerly
My last
known
day was
as.
yesterday.
That's right.
But I do want to thank you all for the resolution. Last meeting, I was overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do with myself, and I was having a lot of feelings, so thank you. But I also I have with me, some of my PTA buddies. I wanted to make sure everyone knew Charlene Walters. She is our new Burbank Council PTA President. Today is day one, and I know how much support I got from all of you, and I'm sure she is going to get exactly the same. And with that, I would like to introduce Kirsten Morris, who is our historian that kept track of all the hours, and she's going to tell you all the great things we did.
Welcome, Ms. Morris.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'll take a deep breath because I get shy and nervous.
Us too.
This is really cool for me. I get to represent all of the volunteers for Burbank PTA throughout every single unit. And I get to tell you guys how hard they worked for the kids here in Burbank. So I'll try to make it short and sweet. Our mission for PTA is every child, one voice. And that's what we work toward at every unit, is to represent every single child and advocate on their behalf. So we have a symbolic check for you guys. It represents 57,000 hours of service. That works out to be about 4 hours per child of individual. That's pretty amazing. I'm so proud of our families and volunteers in Burbank. So the check is in the amount of $2,124,000. Ta-da! So I hope that we can take a picture with this for you guys, and it's been such an honor to advocate for children, and it's an honor to work with all of you, and we look forward to doing more. That's all I have.
All right.
Is that all right?
So what we'll do is we'll have the board and administration, if we can, join for a picture up front.
You have to hold the check, Kirsten. Nice. Good job. Good job. I want to get behind the check so I don't have to. No.
I feel like you guys should hold it.
No, you
That's amazing.
It's more valuable than money.
You don't have to labor.
Do it.
Thank you.
I'm relaxed.
Okay. We're going to do comments, so you're not done yet. Sorry.
Thank you. That was easy, Kelly.
3 down and 1 to go.
I'm going to go to Ms. Tabbitt for her comments first as a former unit president of PTA and give a little deference to history and service there.
In typical PTA fashion, you talk about things and get things accomplished wherever you are. So Ms. Dunkel and I just figured something out that will happen this fall, so we're excited. Thank
There
you
we
for
go.
that.
There we go.
Yes.
No courtesy seat required.
Well,
I like it.
none
Well done.
whatsoever. Thank you to our PTA. What in the world would we do without our PTA volunteers and leaders who bring the fun stuff, the needed stuff, the good stuff to the students and families of our district? I know how much work every volunteer puts in. Those hours, it's like 3 or 4 hours for the one they put in, because heart and soul goes into everything those volunteers do. So it is greatly appreciated. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all the volunteers out there. I really think, as you'll see, it's our PTA and our volunteers, our parents, even the staff members who put out the extra time, that is really what puts Burbank in that special category. And so thank you to all. Lori, thank you for the last 2 years that you've given, and all the rest of you for the many jobs you've taken. It's appreciated.
Great. Sponsor Camp Card.
Thank you. I can only speak as a only 1 year paying PTA member, but I don't know what our school would look like without our Disney PTA. What I see is the value, at least at the elementary level, that our PTAs bring, is they make school so special for our kids outside the classroom. And I just think that's so important. And you know, when we went to the service awards, I saw that on every board, right? In terms of the recognition that you were giving PTA members. And it's really amazing what you're doing. I love that you've quantified it. That makes me so happy. And I do think it's worth at least $2 million, the work that our PTA does. So thank you. And thank you, Miss Little. And look out, Charlene.
That's ominous. Dr. Agakanian. Dr. Agakanian. Tall grass, Ms. Ponser Camcar is waving. Go ahead.
So, we always talk about money and shortage of money. What you've done, it's worth so much more than the $2 million. And I think people see that and they're encouraged and join you and put in even more hours. I also want to thank you because I know all of you, you're like family now. So thank you. And I look forward to working with all of you again for the next year and the continuing years. Thank you very much for all you do.
Dr. Weisberg.
You guys are the best. Charlene, I'll protect you from Abby. Just a huge thank you. I would love to hear, too, some of the different ways that the students spent their time, too, and the people donated their time. So it would be really cool to hear about that as well, because it's so many hours. But just a huge thank you for keeping track and helping coordinate and make opportunities possible so that people can participate in these ways. I wrote you a card, Miss Little, so you know how I feel. I too have emotions that I don't care to discuss at this moment. But I'm so thankful for you and so excited to work with our new council president. And I see Amy Kim hiding back there. We're also deeply appreciative to you, whether you like it or not. But just, I don't think people understand how much work goes on behind the scenes that all of you do all of the time to make things happen. So if we don't say it enough, and we probably don't, just an enormous thank you for everything you do, both seen and unseen.
Thank you. First of all, our Burbank Council PTA family, it really is a family. We have just the leaders in this room have been through so many different episodes and so many different journeys, frankly. It is a sitcom of sorts, but truly one of accomplishment. I want to note that this is, close to $2 million or over $2 million in hours post-pandemic. So these are units that had to deconstruct and reconstruct and come back together in ways that built community and built kind of uniform standards of safety that everybody felt comfortable operating by. And each campus community is different in what different parent groups feel is safe. So to do that work, we talked about that leadership a little bit with Ms. Little and gave her just all due credit, frankly, for being the council PTA president during the pandemic and also Wendy Harville at the beginning of the situation. But the recovery's been hard. And, it is one thing to say thank you. 2.1, it's money. It's significant money. But what it is more than anything is the beginnings of organizing, of building again. Our PTA council has been as effective as it has been because of its connection to community. So the number one thing we can just do to support this and to support the leadership of these amazing leaders, including Charlene, as we wish her the best and we celebrate her, because it's hard to be, a focal point for parent perspectives in a time of such diversity of opinion. I wish you all the success in the world, and I'm here for you in every way, shape, or form, and I'm rooting for you because we're partners in this. We always will be. Just as I rooted for many of your predecessors, I'm now feeling ancient, even though I'm not. This is a partnership, and we're here for you at every step of the way, and then again, we will be here. But the way we can support this organization is to join this organization. I don't have children. I'm very proud in that sense, not to have children, but still to be here and to care about the future outcomes and the future opportunities of young people in this community. Why? Because when you give and when you care about young people and the opportunities, the whole community succeeds. The whole community succeeds. We all have something to work for, a generation to deliver for. Maybe I'll have kids one day, but for now it's really exciting to work on behalf of every single one of your learners. We have a number of folks in the audience tonight who celebrated graduations of their seniors, folks that we watched grow up, frankly, as school board members who got to see these involved parents in our lives. So you have enriched our lives. We know you will continue to enrich lives, and we are all very united in that. There is a membership that is an option, and I'm proud to have one of those memberships where you can join PTA once and join all the units at once. So I made a joke about courtesy seats. You've got to have membership to participate in these meetings. Membership counts. But the way we can help support this organization, support their advocacy, which has been historic at times, is by joining. I encourage everybody to join at burbankcouncilpta.org. I'm just going to ask that we coordinate with, and by the way, that was training. That was absolutely training, years after year after year, of understanding how important it is to spread the word. It doesn't matter if you have children in these schools. You can join, you can participate, and these events, the way they provide supports in the classroom, absolutely changes educational outcomes for these kids. Do it. So, burbankcouncilpta.org. Thank you all. And we will work with you again next year, but in the meantime, enjoy the summer a little bit, except for Charlene. You'll get to work. We're on it. Thank you so much. With that, I believe that is our last presentation, correct, Dr. Hill? We will move to item 9, request to address the board. I have a number of cards. We'll continue to accept cards until the final person has concluded their speech. Schlossman is the first card, followed by Annie.
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad you were able to promote from within those new appointments. At the heart of the First Amendment is the recognition of fundamental importance of the free flow of ideas and opinions on matters of public interest and concern. The fact that society may find speech offensive is not a sufficient reason for suppressing it. Indeed, if the speaker's opinion that gives offense, if it is the speaker's opinion that gives offense, that consequence is a reason for according it constitutional protection. Now, those are not my words. Those are from 1988, Chief Justice William Rehnquist of the Supreme Court. And at the last meeting, we had a speaker here who was talking about his opinions on pride and his opinions on religion, particularly, I believe it was Christianity. And you folks, some of you took turns really giving him a hard time. To the superintendent's credit, he said the most intelligent thing of all. And even I was guilty of not saying the right thing under that because of what he said. So there's one deal here. I thought about this, And, speech comes in many forms. It could be verbal, it could be my cardboard sign, a sticker on a car, even that coffee cup or whatever you call it, a flask of Miss Weisberg's. She had her flask on display for an entire meeting, and on her flask is a Star of David, and that's a religious symbol. And her particular symbol has been bastardized. It's been rainbow flagged. And some people might take offense at that. So riddle me this, Mr. President. What was the difference between that fella who was standing here saying things that most of us disagreed with and Miss Weisberg's speech, which she's free to display, of the Star of David, which is a Judaic symbol? So that didn't sit well with me, that here you are attacking this guy and she's doing the same type of thing. So I'm going to leave that at that. Now, item number 10A on your agenda, you're going to see some slides maybe tonight, and slide 10 has one word in it, slide 10, paragraph 3, number 3. And it has to do with one word that doesn't sit well, and that word is likely. It's talking about reporting accusations. And California Penal Code 11166B, it says, all persons who are mandated reporters are required by law to report all known or suspected cases of child abuse or neglect. And here's the important part. It is not the job of the mandated reporter to determine whether the allegations are valid. So you've got a 100-day safety plan that you called for, and it's not real definitive if the police are going to be involved. And when there's an allegation, even if it's just an allegation, we had all these young women come up and talk to you very passionately about their abuse. And it's, according to your own report right now, it's not mandated that the police are involved. It's subject to Mr. Paramo, it's subject to the principal of the school. And if you're going to take this stuff seriously, please change that word from likely to must or will be reported to the police. Thank you for your attention.
Our next speaker is Annie, followed by Caroline Solberg. Hi, Annie.
Good evening, board members. My name is Annie, and I have been a Burbank resident for 30 years. I'm here to comment on item 12O. As a threshold matter, I want to draw the board's attention to the fact that this matter has been agendized in a misleading way. It's identified as an agreement for a facilities master plan, but that's not what this is. This is an agreement for a housing evaluation. And on that basis alone, you should deny this request until at the very least it complies with the Brown Act. So I want to start also by saying that I am an advocate for affordable housing and believe that safe and affordable shelter is essential for self-sufficiency. It is on that foundation that I wholly oppose this proposal. First, if your goal in doing this assessment is to build housing to attract top-tier educators, you do not have to spend your resources on these consultants. If you pay a living and competitive wage, educators will come and have the freedom of choice on where to live. That home may or may not be in Burbank, but it will certainly be in a location that makes sense for the entire family unit. Second, if the goal is to meet state mandates for affordable housing, the intersection of Scott Road and Keystone is not the right location to do it. Affordable housing must be where opportunity resides. That means where there is availability of public transportation and viable employment options. The intersection of Scott Road and Keystone lacks both. Third, the cost. The City of Los Angeles has been redeveloping public-run housing for 10 years now. They finally have residents in those new units 10 years later at a cost of upwards of $800,000 per unit, not including regular management and maintenance costs. You don't need to spend $500,000 on a consultant to do this assessment, at least not now. Talk to the City of Los Angeles. Learn from them and from their experiences and challenges. That will show you, without a doubt, that Keystone and Scott Road is not where to invest this money. Not the $800,000 per unit, and certainly not the $500,000 for this consultant. If you're looking for ways to build housing density, you have plenty of better options in Burbank. What's happening to the old IKEA? Why is the Empire Center a single-story retail and parking lot? Why weren't those considered long time ago? Finally, I invite you to look within and have a dialogue with your counterparts at the City of Burbank. Many Burbankians are in the fight for affordable housing with you, but the city is making this such a challenge. It takes 24 months to get a permit to build anything on your property, ADU or anything else, and the cost is exponentially increased by permit and inspection costs. The city has so many ADU applications that they've outsourced the review to consultants who don't know the city code, yet they get approved, and they get approved at a snail's pace. This is despite the fact that state regulations require quick turnaround. Look at the applications for submissions for approval, and I can assure you that you'll be shocked at what you find. Again, I request that you oppose item 12O.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Caroline Solberg, followed by Gina Bollinger, followed by Eric Carter. Solberg, hello.
Hello, good evening, President Ferguson, school board members, Superintendent Dr. Hill, staff. I have some questions about the Gate Master Plan. It's my understanding that the Gate Master Plan is no longer in effect. I was told it would be reviewed and incorporated into the district's 10-year plan and the local control accountability plan. The LCAP it's my understanding that it's a funding plan. It's not a document that lays out goals and expectations of a program and how the program will be implemented. So I'm confused as to how that will address replacing the former document. Board Policy 6172 says in part, the board shall annually review the progress of students enrolled in the district's GATE program and administration of the program using methods identified in the district's GATE plan and may require modifications in the program as indicated by the results of this review. So since the GATE program, or the GATE Master Plan is no longer in effect and the 10-year plan has not been written, what plan will you use to do the review this year? When was the last review done? How can parents see the last review? Where should they go to find it? And when will the next annual review, when is the next annual review scheduled to occur? The GATE Master Plan was voted on by the board for approval, and then it was voted on by the board to be amended. Was it voted on by the board to be eliminated? And if it was, when? And if it wasn't, why not? Again, just trying to understand the process. And then why did you decide to eliminate this and the other plans without having a new plan in place? So I would really request, I plead with you, could you please leave the master plans in effect until you have a new plan to replace them? And then finally, I'm not sure how a 10-year plan would replace the existing plan for this reason. The existing plan explains a program, its goals, its expectations, how it's supposed to be implemented. My understanding of how a 10-year plan might work, and if I'm incorrect on this, I'm looking for information, is that it would be in regards to the GATE plan. It would say, the 10-year plan would say, in year one, our goal is to fund or implement 10% of the GATE plan. And in year three, our goal is to implement 20% of the GATE plan. But it wouldn't lay out the day-to-day details of how it's done the way a GATE plan would. So I don't feel that the LCAP or the 10-year plan replaces the GATE plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Gina Bollinger, followed by Eric Carter, followed by Jen Goldenberg. Good evening.
Good evening, President Ferguson, board members, Dr. Hill, and staff. My name is Gina Boulanger, and I come to you here tonight with a heart filled with gratitude for the support the board, administrators, teachers, and support staff have shown my family and many more like mine. We moved to Burbank nearly 6 years ago, specifically so our kids could attend BUSD schools. At the time, we had a freshman at Burroughs and a third grader at Disney. The freshman is now finishing her sophomore year at Glendale Community College and is looking forward to Whittier College in their next journey. And that third grader was just promoted at Dolores Huerta Middle School and is excited to start playing girls basketball at Burroughs in the fall. My kids have been involved in athletics in several clubs, one of which, the Minecraft Club, was started by my child at Huerta during the pandemic. My kids and I have volunteered many hours within this district and have been members of the PTA since we moved here. All of this is to say that my family holds a large stake in the decisions made by this board. And I want to take this opportunity to thank each of you for recognizing that Pride Month is the opportunity to show support to a very targeted group in this country's politics right now. Even though the school year is over, students and community members feel targeted, see these beautiful pride flags flying in our community at the school sites, and it means the world to them. Your support is appreciated by my family and many, many more in the BUSD community. Those of us that have taken time to do true research by reading peer-reviewed studies, listening to medical experts in their fields, and listening to the experience of members in the community know being gay or trans isn't a choice. It isn't a mental illness. It isn't a disorder. We know the majority of crime perpetrated on minors isn't by drag queens, but by members of their own family, family friends, and clergy. We know members of the LGBTQIA community aren't trying to push any agenda down anyone's throat, unless you mean the agenda that all Americans are supposed to have, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To the vocal yet diminishing minority that use this forum and others to spread hate and religious vitriol against the LGBTQIA community, I invite you to reflect on the fact that as of the census of 2021, 7.9% of all American adults identify as part of the LGBT and this wonderful community. The state of California has the largest population in the country at about approximately 2.7 million LGBTQIA adults. If you look at your family, your circle of friends, your church members, your community, and you don't know a single person somewhere on this beautiful spectrum, know it is for a good reason. They hear what you say in this body. They read your social media posts, they listen to you at the dinner table, and they know you are not a safe person with whom to be their true selves. It is you problem, not them. And you are on the wrong side of history, and you probably know it. And when this is all over and we move back to into acceptance as a community, you will go back into your home filled with ignorance, hate, and loneliness. I choose love. I choose acceptance. I choose support. And it isn't too late for you to choose those things too. To the LGBTQIA youth, families, and staff with us tonight, and to those watching from home, I see you, I honor you, and I support you. You matter. You are loved, and you are not alone. I am sorry that you have to hear ignorant people make false accusations against your community. I am sorry you've had to endure debates on your very existence, what may or may not happen legally in the privacy of your own home, or which reproductive organs your child may or may not have. To be honest, I find people's obsession with the private parts of other people's children to be very disturbing and should probably be looking more closely into that. The most effective leaders lead with love, not hate. They lead with hope, not fear. They lead with compassion, not cruelty. And as former NBA center and first openly gay pro athlete Jason Collins once said, openness may not completely disarm prejudice, but it's a good place to start. Thank you again to the board for disarming prejudice with openness and support, and may we continue to work to build a community of love, hope, and compassion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Eric Carter, followed by Jen Goldenberg.
Good evening, President Ferguson, board members, Dr. Hill, and staff. My name is Eric Carter. I'm a special ed teacher here in the Burbank Unified School District. I just want to first express my heartfelt thanks and gratitude that our district is flying the pride flag again during Pride Month. A few years ago, I had approached Dr. Hill with this and former school board member Steve Frittner about doing this. Of course, we did it like 2 weeks before Pride Month, and he said, not yet. There's process and protocol that we must go through in order to do this, and we went through those proper procedures in the following year. We got our pride flags, and it was very happy to see. By showing the symbol, our district, and rightfully so, sends a message to our schools and the community that our schools are places that students are welcomed and our staff members are welcomed, and we don't have to fear. It's not perfect. We know there's still things that we need to work out in our schools, and that's always going to be a work in progress, but it's better and better each year. It's also nice to see that within Burbank and the LA community, a lot of our churches and synagogues are also flying the pride flag. And I know mine has been doing it for about 50 years now. And I'm seeing more and more do so. And it's nice that we are having more places of inclusion. It's nice going to our local businesses and they have little symbols in their doorway, and you know this is a safe place to go to. Because I am one who is very particular about where my consumer dollar goes, which is why I have never shopped at Walmart my entire life, and you'll never see me at Hobby Lobby. So that's all on that topic. The second topic I know I brought up back in June, or rather January, when we were talking about districting, about ranked choice voting. I just want to give you an update as to where we are on that. And I've been working a lot with our city council, our city clerk, and other nonprofit organizations with that. Right now, everything's tied up with the county. There's nothing the cities can do or school board can do. It's LA County, the Registrar of Voters, who is just saying right now, I am not going to spend money to update our equipment. So we are working with our County Board of Supervisors in order to compel the county registrar in order to update our voting equipment. And we're also working with other cities throughout LA County to put pressure on the county to allow our voting machines and have ranked choice voting as an option. And we're also looking at making an amendment to the California Voting Rights Act to where there's an amendment in there that counties need to update their voting equipment and allow not only ranked choice voting, but proportional ranked choice voting, which then could work for cities who still choose to do at-large districts, like Ojai just switched from their districts back to a multi-district using proportional ranked choice voting. So we're looking at making those amendments at the state level. So I just want to give you guys an update on that since we brought it up. But we're working through it. It's going to be a few years, but we're working hard to make it happen. And the other 88 municipalities, we're working with them too. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jen Goldenberg. Followed by Mark Tadros.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah, I'm here. But I'm here as a parent tonight. So, and I'm going to try not to cry.
It's okay if you do.
And thank God there's a timer here, Cindy, because, people who work with me, they know I just could go on and on. So I am a proud parent of a graduate from John Burroughs High School. Thank God we got Lynn across the finish line. Oh my gosh, it was touch and go. Props to Jody Levy, who's Lynn's counselor, or was Lynn's counselor, and Jen Gomez, Lynn's case manager. I'm here to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, and also this goes out to Roberta Reynolds and Steve Frittner too. I don't know if they ever watch. Because of the pride flags, I was almost in tears when I saw it first fly. And I took a picture and I sent it to Tom Kissinger. I'm like, look what's flying in Burbank. And we were both like, oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you for holding your ground, for putting the flag up there, because it may, like if you're not part of the LGBTQIA community, it may not be that big of a deal, but when you see something, like some former previous speakers said, like something as subtle as this watch band, people know that I'm a safe place, It's subtle things like that, and the flag is not subtle. It's beautiful, and my daughter was really, really excited when I showed her the picture of it the first time. I asked her tonight, I said, is it okay, how do you want me to say this? Are you my child who's a member of the community, or do I just say how you identify? She's like, say I'm transgender. I said, okay. So she is so out on social media. Oh my God. But she wasn't like that. When I brought her to Burbank, it was, I've worked in the district since 1995. When I brought her to Huerta, back then Jordan, I had to go talk with teachers and say, this is my child's new name. Please don't use the dead name. I was the first parent to sign the official form for changing the name in Aries. And also when Lynn's dead name came up when they were taking the SBAC in 8th grade, and I was like, oh my gosh, Bob Martin. Oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. He immediately got on the phone with the CDE. 2 years later, it's changed. So the preferred name is what shows up. And it wasn't just because of Bob, but he just is kind of, a huge advocate for kids and kids being safe. Sometimes people say that they leave California because it's too liberal and they don't want their children raised here, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? There are some beautiful states here that I can't take my child to. So my kid was part of choir, and there was a trip that was scheduled in a state that was anti-LGBTQ, and we had to pull it and had to reschedule it and go to a different state. And I was talking with a friend of mine whose kid is not part of the community, but she's of color. And she and I are both like, okay, do we fly with the choir there? Do we drive them separately? Do we have to, this is crazy. Like, people are like, oh my gosh, trans kids changing clothes or trans people using the bathroom. Let me tell you, when my kid does either one, it's like really quickly, because they're 18 and, they're teenager. It's like, in PE, changing really quickly or going to the bathroom really quickly and getting out of there. They're not there to do anything nefarious. No teenager really is, I hope. So there have been just 2 little things that have come up in the time that Lynn was in Burbank, and each time the staff was amazing. One time, the first thing that happened, I was super embarrassed, and I came to work and I was crying, and Sharon's like, this is a thing. This you're not just being a parent sounding an alarm. I was heard, and the situation was resolved before 24 hours had passed. And I'd already said to Dr. Hill, I wanted him to know the good work that Sharon Cuseo and John Paramo were doing. And at the time also Dr. McGlemery and Sean, oh my gosh, McCallan. So, and then, and my time is up, so thank you. And I've only gotten shout outs to some people, but there are so many amazing people in this district who are supportive of kids, because kids are just humans.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Mark Tadros. Did I get that last? Yeah, you got it. Okay, excellent. Thank you. And that's the last card I have at this time.
First off, I'd like to thank you guys for what you do. I'm coming before you guys for agenda item 12.0. I grew up in Burbank my whole life. I went to Horace Mann. So I'm very familiar with the district and how everything works. And you guys want to build housing on the empty land, or are planning or to explore, let's just say. That's how it rubbed off to us, our neighbors. I went around yesterday. I talked to all the neighbors. And I just got the general opinion of how everyone feels in our neighborhood if anything was built on that land. One, we already deal with congestion every morning and every afternoon when they pick up their children. So we're already dealing with some problems with that. But everyone was shocked and taken aback when we heard the news that you guys were exploring plans to possibly do something with that land. And we feel that quality of life there would significantly decrease if you guys end up developing something there. We already are facing problems with picking up and dropping off. And we just want everyone on the board to know, I'm not against housing and building at all. Actually, affordable housing is a problem, and I agree with you guys. But I don't think that's the right place to put it, and I don't think that's worth your money. if you want me to be quite honest. So if you guys are planning to develop that land, I just want you guys to know, on behalf of our neighborhood, I know some couldn't come today, we really do not feel as if this is a wise plan, and I would really, really hope that you guys reject this and try to not build anything there, because we don't feel as if it's right. So, thank you.
Thank you. That is our final speaker at this time. Are there any other speakers who wish to address the board? Seeing none, we'll close the period of public comment and go to staff for their response.
Thank you, President Ferguson, and thank you to all the speakers this evening. Mr. Schlossman, as I highlighted in my email, the word likely is for the steps and was the last step, likely a risk assessment. We don't always do a risk assessment through process, but reporting to the police and following the other steps, we absolutely do every time. So I just want to make sure that was clear. Apparently my email was not. So I'll make sure that's highlighted when we discuss that. For the two speakers, thank you for coming down, Annie and Mark, about item 12.0, the housing assessment. Just want to clarify that the $500,000, we're doing a facilities master plan. We're reviewing all of our properties, all of our sites to look at what the potential enhancements can be there. This item this evening is an amendment. So the overall contract is $500,000. The amendment is the $15,000 to look at, with our land that we're not using fully as school site resources, what are housing options for our educators. There are no plans to move forward right now. This is to have a contract to do an assessment. So I just want to make sure that's very clear. When that assessment comes back, it's going to be fully transparent discussions. And if there's ever a time where we're going to do any development on our school sites, it is a fully public process that everyone can weigh in. We follow all of the state and local rules around that. So I just want to make sure you all know that. There's nothing being fast-tracked or under the radar. So I appreciate you coming down, but I just want to make sure those that are watching at home. So,
This item should have been transparent.
excuse me.
as well.
Okay. All right. For Ms. Solberg, just it's a longer conversation since it's not an agenda item. I think we can follow up with me or Ms. Caseo, but from the board discussion around goals, the conversation was we're going to transition to our governance committees, and we're talking about our master plans and what their involvement is. Our master plans are still in place. We didn't just throw those away. They're still on our website. We use those as guiding documents. My email about the Academic Affairs Subcommittee, that's where a discussion would be, where do we revise? Where do we fit in our GATE master plan? Does it fit into the 10-year plan? How is it aligned to LCAP? Those are all conversations that will be had in public through the subcommittee. And so it's not that we just say, the board had a discussion about moving to subcommittees and finding a way to get to a 10-year plan, and we started having conversations about master plan. It wasn't just like throw everything out. So I just want to make sure that's clear. We still are focused on our GATE population. We use that plan as a guiding document. What's coming up next will be a transition phase that we will work together with the community. And then I just want to thank Ms. Boulanger, Mr. Carter, and Ms. Goldenberg for your advocacy and your support and your testimonials for our students, employees, and our community in Pride Month. We are so excited to honor all of our employees, our students, and families that we can celebrate in our LGBTQ community. And so thank you for coming down here acknowledging that this evening. Thank you.
Okay, board member responses, Ms. Tabbitt.
Thank you to the speakers who came down tonight to share your thoughts and opinions with us. Ms. Boulanger, Mr. Carter, Ms. Goldenberg, thank you very much. Mr. Carter, you said it very well. It's the way I feel too about the pride flag. It means everybody is welcome, everyone is accepted and loved here. And that means a lot to me. I live in a neighborhood where there's several pride flags, and I was thinking as you were speaking, there should be a lot more because everybody just needs to feel welcomed. So thank you for coming down and sharing that. And I know that our support and flying the flag will continue. So thank you. Dr. Hill, I think you did a great job in explaining 12.0 to Mark and Annie. We did receive several letters about this as well. It's not voting on a plan. It's just having an outside organization take a look at what does that mean for the district. Or is it feasible? Could we afford it? On and on and on. And you're right. There would be tons of dialogue before it ever got to the point that a shovel was put into the ground. It would take a very long time for this to take place. This is just, what's the deal with this? Is it a possibility amongst all the other things that the district needs in a facilities master plan? Roofing, infrastructure, technology, all of those things are going to be looked at. This was just something that, kind of looked at in addition to everything else that needs to be done. So please know nothing's being slid in. It's just a question. What's the possibility? That is all. Did I miss anyone else? Ms. Sahlberg, thank you for your advocacy for our children and wanting to know answers to many questions. There's a meeting coming up that we'll be talking about the 10-year plan amongst some other things. So hopefully we'll have some better answers and a more distinct idea of what's happening and how this is all working. So appreciate it. Keep those questions coming. And that's all I have. Thank you very much. Oh, one last thing. I'm so sorry. Thank you to everyone in the district, from elementary staffs, middle school staffs, high school staffs, parents, PTA, once again, who worked so hard to make graduation week. Our facilities guys. Wow. Thanks to all of you for making graduation week so successful for our students. Doesn't matter if you're promoting from elementary school or middle school or graduating from high school. That is a huge day for our families, and it's appreciative. I really was impressed, since Mr. Maxwell, you're sitting here at the front, our director of facilities, was at Luther, and I was at Luther, right? You weren't with me. Dr. Weisberg was with me. And we did trade. Thank you. And there's 1,000 chairs set up that are beautifully arranged as we arrive with a stage. And the graduation ends, and it was like the cavalry riding in. About 4 or 5 trucks rolled in, and those guys had those chairs packed up and ready to go in 20 minutes. It was wonderful to see how they all worked together and made things happen, because those chairs had to go somewhere else, I imagine, for someone else's promotion or graduation. So it was a great week, and thank you to everyone.
Ms. Ponser-Kamkar.
Thank you. I will echo what Board Member Taba is saying, just that graduation was unbelievable. It's my first year doing all of that. I went to a lot. I had no voice last weekend after saying congratulations, well done to 200 some kids. But it was really wonderful. And just thank you to our school sites and to our parents for putting together just these beautiful culmination events for our students. Like, I went to a couple of the elementary schools. A number of us here were at the adult school. It was very cool to see all of the school sites really celebrating student achievement. To our speakers, thank you for coming, and to do a callback for exercising your First Amendment rights. As far as the facilities plans go, again, this is an amendment to the facility plan that's that we've already approved. And that's something that we'll be taking up in the Administrative Affairs Committee, that we'll be looking at very closely. Mr. Tadros, if Horseman isn't being a good neighbor, that's kind of a different thing to talk about. So I live across the street from the high school, so I can understand that, pick up and drop off can be a lot. I just don't leave my driveway for about 20 minutes in the morning and the afternoon, but I realize that's not ideal. So if they're not being good neighbors, let's work on that separately. And again, we haven't decided anything. This is really just to investigate, is this the best use of our land to have just really an empty plot back there? So we're going to find out. As far as Ms. Boulanger and Mr. Carter and Ms. Goldenberg, thank you to you and your families for being advocates and for being pioneers in this work, it sounds like. I can only imagine what that's like, that you've paved the road for students and parents to come, and I thank you for that. And I thank your students for that, and I thank your families for that, because it matters. So thank you, and thank you for coming and for speaking up. Thanks.
Looking at you, Dr. Agakanian.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do also want to thank our speakers, but also Ms. Boulanger and all the people who talked about love. I've always shared my story, and it's important to me to share the story because love is what saved me, When I was 15, sitting in a refugee camp in a dark corner by myself, being angry at the world, it was the love of the people around me, even though they were different religions, different countries, different languages. It's what really saved me. And I've shared this story, and I will continue sharing it. Having come from a country of war and revolution, having to leave at 14, and eventually ended up in Germany as a refugee, being isolated for 6 months without parents. Love is what saved me. And that's the moment I realized that we're all humans, and we should all respect each other. And I hope that we bring that more and more when it comes to what's going on right now in our country, and talk more about love and how it can really save us all as human beings. Thank you.
Dr. Weisberg.
Hi, thank you. Let me scroll. I want to start, Annie, I'm sorry, I don't know your last name, so I feel like I'm insulting you by only using first name. And Mr. Tadros, is that how you pronounce it? So thank you to both of you. Annie, I think you said something that was really important to address, sort of talking about how it felt like it was hidden. So I know there was like a pretty insert adjective letter that was being circulated around that sort of used this language that made it seem like there was this nefarious, incendiary, top secret thing that was going on. But I mean, I went back immediately and looked at the packet, and it's very clear. I mean, I really appreciate it. I looked at it again after you spoke. I mean, the subject says, add service proposal for housing evaluation. So there's no intentional hiding of anything. It's very clearly right there. So one of the tough things about our agenda is that often you have these like attached presentations and attached packets that are like 85 or 90 pages. And it's not because we're trying to shove in secret information. They're just long. And I know because I read through every single one of them before board meetings. So it would be interesting to know, and maybe you can shoot us an email about this, like how else, I'm curious to know, and we can't do a back and forth because it's not how it's structured, but I would be very interested to hear from you in regards to like, what would be a way that you would have wanted to know about this $15,000 addition that wasn't done this time, right? Because the way that our proposals go, this is like really standard, but I would love to hear if you have a suggestion for a way that something could have been inserted so it didn't feel to you like it was less than transparent. So.
No.
I can't, but I would love to email with you or hop on the phone with you.
That's right.
It's just not how public comment is, but I would love to continue the conversation in a forum where we can. I know that people clarified the $500,000 is not for the housing. We're doing this whole facilities master plan, and if you look at the front page of it, I don't know if anybody read anything else, there's also a really helpful description of why we're doing it, why it's super important, and how it's like a really integral part of effective growth for the district. It's like a paragraph, so if you haven't checked it out, it's worth looking at. And again, I want to reiterate, because I do think it's important that this process, I mean, you talked about, hold on. Like, is it the right place to build, and issues of congestion? Those are all things that is the entire reason why we've asked for this to be explored, right? Because we may end up going, oh yeah, there's too much congestion, this isn't going to work. But at the core of it, and I think this is important to also keep in mind, is that Annie, to your point about paying teachers a livable wage, yeah. Absolutely. And I don't know if you've been following the board meetings over the past couple of months, but we've been cutting and pushing and moving things around in every way possible to try to compensate our teachers. And we know that it's not enough. And that's a long conversation about funding, and dear Lord, we don't need to get into that now. But one of the things that we've been asked to do is to be creative about how we can bring in and retain high quality staff and teachers. And one of those is to think outside the box and say, okay, we can't pay people X dollars, but what can we do? Maybe we can create an environment. The community only gets better when our public servants live in the community in which they work. So the conversation, I think, is important. I also think it sends a message to our community, which is like, hey, we're really trying to think about ways that we can show you that you're valuable to us, because we know we can't compensate you in the way that you should be compensated. So I hope that people will keep reaching out. And to back to that letter just for a second, there's this sense of like really wanting people to sort of assume good intentions. If you're looking for and I don't think this is what you're doing, by the way. If you're looking for something nefarious or underhanded, you can almost always find it. And that's how that letter that got circulated sort of read to me. It was like this mashup of misinformation about some sort of attacks and the housing, and it's made it seem like we were doing something really sort of sneaky, which we absolutely weren't. But again, that's why I ask you, like, again, let's hop on the phone, do a Zoom, email. I'd love to hear suggestions for ways that we could communicate when we have a change to a proposal, so that people maybe didn't have to go through the whole proposal, even though this was at the top. So again, I want to encourage anybody who's listening. I know everyone in this community is too smart and too invested to be swayed by pieces of misinformation that are left on people's cars and doors. But reach out to us if you have questions. Don't just assume that some sort of anonymous letter is actually giving you information in a way that we aren't. So we're available to you. I know you're shaking your head, but I mean, there's nothing that I'm sharing with you right now that isn't accurate or truthful. And it seems like you're sort of coming in with a feeling of like, you don't believe that from jump.
No, I didn't believe the letter.
We've got to stop
Great.
the back and
So-
forth.
so that's-
It's not, excuse
No,
me.
I am.
You've got, I understand that.
That's my fault.
That is not the format of this meeting.
That's my
So,
fault. And again, that's why I said I don't think this is you. This is more for the community, because I got probably about 20 text messages with images of this letter, and they're like, what, people are saying, what is this? So that wasn't, Annie, I think you were swayed. This is more of a general conversation that I want people to do what you did tonight and what Mark did tonight, which is talk to us, right? Because we can't have a conversation and we can't clarify if we don't know that there are issues. So I'm really appreciative to both of you for coming down here. I know it may not satisfy all of your concerns, but you have our emails. Please reach out. Reach out to Mr. Cantwell, Dr. Hill. We'll continue to have this conversation. And I believe we're targeted to have results sometime in December of 2023 of the conversation beginning. So thank you to you both. Please reach out again. Ms. Goldenberg, Ms. Boulanger, Mr. Carter, thank you. I know that as a board, sometimes there's lots of things that we're not in lockstep about. Maybe we disagree, which is healthy and good. But on this issue, we couldn't be more in unity, that we will continue to support all of our students and our staff and our families, and make sure that everybody feels like it is a welcoming, inclusive, and safe space to learn. Not just for our kiddos. So it's really wonderful to hear your feedback. I also think that, I can't remember who said it, so apologies, but somebody talked about how, it's good, but there's room for growth, and that's also important. There's a lot of work left to do, but I am really proud of our district as you look around the country right now, and you see so much hate and so much violence emotionally and sometimes physically against our LGBTQIA+ community, that there's never been a more important time to stand unified as leaders. And I also too think, I want to just give like a very brief sort of shout out to Board President Ferguson. I know he's going to be pissed, but I just want to say this. I remember when COVID was at its peak and there were people showing up with like Jewish stars on them to protest vaccines. And as a Jewish woman, it was excruciating. It was excruciating to feel like there's this part of me that was being attacked. And to navigate that was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever had to do as a board member. But it stopped, right? I'm not saying anti-Semitism isn't a thing. It is, but like I don't deal with it on a meeting by meeting basis. Mr. Ferguson does. As board president, as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, he does deal with homophobia, transphobia, hate speech, pretty much every meeting. And to navigate that as a human being and as a leader in Burbank is an unbelievably difficult thing to do. And I think it's important to call that out, that we're people too. We're not just in leadership positions. Everybody here, we're all human beings. And I wish more people would be thoughtful about that when they came up here. But a thank you to Ms. Cuseo and Dr. Hill and Dr. Parama, who isn't here, and everybody for continuing to do the work and continuing to show up and address issues that we don't even hear about, right? Because they happen every single day. So everybody up here, I think we're all a team, and I'm thankful to that. But I also wanted to shout out what I know is a really difficult thing to navigate, and I think that's important to highlight. I think that's everybody. Oh, Ms. Solberg, thank you, thank you, thank you. Sounds like we have some more conversations to have, and one of the things we talked about at the last board meeting, I can't remember if you were here, is we're talking about putting together sort of a one sheet to explain these changes, because like I said last time, you're not the only one who's like, So how we can put it together more clearly, because I am really excited about the governance change, but it's also a big change. So just helping people better understand what we're doing, I think, is going to be helpful and really important. So thank you for that consistent reminder and asking for clarification.
Happy Pride Month, everybody. First of all, thank you to all of our speakers who came down. And I realize this is a different format, so I want to just acknowledge that from the start. And unfortunately, I do need to keep that order because that is the uniform standard we have to hold everything to ensure everybody has equal time to participate in this meeting. First of all, I love the fact that the community is talking about Horace Mann. I love that the community is dreaming about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate for that site, because right now that site is underutilized. And it is a property and an asset of this community. That parcel and that school was here a long time before many of the property owners in that area bought property in that area. And I have to be honest as a trustee that I am looking at a series of budgets that continue to decline in terms of revenue, that continue to decline in terms of enrollment. And I, as somebody who pitched this concept of a 10-year plan that could potentially include housing on that parcel and others, I find it very interesting that it was only that neighborhood that got flyered. Fascinating. This shouldn't be a process we approach with fear. It's what you're intended to be here with these flyers. But I'm so grateful for these flyers in that sense, because it's going to begin this conversation, and it's a conversation we need to have. We need to have housing in this community, and especially for our teachers. Why? Because eventually it just doesn't make sense to drive 2 hours to get to work every day, financially and otherwise. That doesn't make sense. What also doesn't make sense is to have a gigantic, we know the California real estate market, we know Burbank's real estate market in particular, and as a former parks commissioner, let me just tell you, the land behind Horace Mann Elementary has been long considered to be a place for potential soccer fields, which the neighborhood has also fought. It has also been concepts for different developments. And to me, I would much rather that hillside, one, with its fire danger, two, with the neighborhood that exists there, and I grew up in that neighborhood and know those stop signs get run all the time. I know that speed, and I know the fear that many of those families have dealing with that. The council needs to address that in real ways, because that speeding is unacceptable all along the hillside. And I'm with you on that 100% of the way. You deserve to live in safe neighborhoods, and right now they aren't. And I'm with you on that 100%. But I have teachers and classified employees who I can't attract here. And if I can't attract them to teach, and if I can't attract them to support, our schools will decline, and the houses that you enjoy, which no doubt you invested in major ways, because of good schools, we're going to lose that. So I'm not here to work against you in any way, shape, or form. I'm here to work with you. And what's really amazing about this plan is that we can actually look at redesigning the layout of that parcel to better serve the needs of the community, to slow cars down. And I'm going to ask that we consider that as a part of this revisioning of and potential use of Horace Mann. I would much rather there be housing back there for teachers and for classified employees of this school district than it be given to a private developer to be sold off for one-time use and for you to get little to no input with public officials outside of 2 hearings where your neighborhood and your voices can count. I believe in the power of our neighborhoods. I'm here because of it. I really am. But I have to be honest in saying, I don't want that going to a private developer. I don't think that widespread recreation spaces adjacent to fire danger areas that could impact your families is acceptable either. I do think that there's a sensible middle ground in potentially putting housing up there for the people who take care of our kids. I think that's a middle ground, and I think you are all very reasonable neighbors who understand that property is what it is and that we have very few options. And I hope Dr. Agakanian catches his breath. So, I don't want to discount and throw your opinions away. I am more than happy to discuss this, especially as somebody who's initiating this concept, who's talking and just saying, hey, can we talk about it? I mean, you hear Ms. Tabbitt, whoa, this is only a concept. We've got all the other things in the world to talk about. We've got to talk about big ideas in this town. We've got to not be fearful of the big ideas in this town. Why? Because that's what this town has always been about. Motion pictures, the Hoover Dam, the stealth bomber, that's what was built in this town. We can build housing for teachers and classified employees. When it comes to Pride Month, Gina, thank you. Really powerful. It's nice to hear people see people. I think we're missing how beautiful each other are. Really. And I hate that. I hate that people, and I'm seeing it all over, right? We see it in Glendale Unified, we're seeing it in Satacoy Elementary. Even if you don't get it, let me just tell you, it doesn't take much to just keep your mouth shut and watch. Maybe you learn something beautiful. Maybe, right? I don't know a lot of things about a lot of different communities and cultures, but I learn and I appreciate. And I hope we can do that this Pride Month in this community. I'm not going to stand up here and support First Amendment rights when First Amendment rights are burning down people and making people feel less than human. Sorry. I understand that is your right, but I'm not supporting it in this moment. I'm sorry. And sorry, not sorry. I got kids who are killing themselves because of stupid comments like that. And they don't deserve that. They deserve better. And again, if you want to engage in language that could elevate the risk for kids to kill themselves, that could elevate the risk for people to feel alienated and alone, so that they make that ultimate step which they can't undo. If you want to be a part of raising that, because you are, that's what you're doing. That's who you are as a human being. And at the end of my time on this planet, I won't be that person. Thank you, everybody who came down for public comment, to all the folks who are celebrating Pride this month. Celebrate loudly, celebrate in your own way, and celebrate you. You're beautiful, and we're excited to have you a part of the Burbank community. And with that, we will go to our next report, which is the report on the 100-day safety plan.
Good evening, President Ferguson, board members, staff, and community. Back in March, we had a very tragic event where an intruder got on our campus. And that is something that staff and I have been working very closely since that day in March to make sure that we are assessing all of our safety protocols. In addition, we had concerns raised to us about how we handle allegations of sexual assault and harassment. So we've been taking the same level of due diligence, care, and thought to look at all of our processes and protocols. So I'll be giving a 100-day update this evening. I want to continue the dialogue. This is not a presentation where we feel that we are done with our work. This is ongoing work. So I want to thank all of our school site employees, our district office employees, the senior leadership team, because everybody has been collecting information, reviewing, reflecting, and leading this work. I want to thank President Ferguson for doing this work with me as well as the board members when we had our safety town halls. And I definitely want to give a shout out to Stacy Cashman, Head of Student Services, and Mr. Dennis Maxwell, Head of Facilities. They have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting around this and the implementation, so I want to thank them both for their work. So when we look at what we've done in the last 100-day plan, let me make sure I got this. This first slide, I just want to highlight some of the activities we've done in the past year prior to the events in March, just as a reminder. We talked about some of these items at the March 16th board meeting, but just want to make sure that the community knows that some of the ongoing things that we do are school safety plans, our school walks on campuses. We're looking at our emergency supplies. You'll see some of the specific details on the slide, the trainings that we do. How do we make sure that we're in partnership with our safety community, Burbank Police Department, the mental health teams? How do we do reporting in an easy manner? I did get feedback, and we got feedback through the listening campaign that the We Tip hotline is not something that students are as it's a little clunky. So that we're going to continue to do that, but I'll talk about some improvements that we're going to make there. But these are some of the standard buckets that we always look at. What are our policies? What are our procedures? Training, support, and then the physical changes we can make to our school sites. After the events in March, we immediately made some additional changes. So we made sure, and we talked about this at that first town hall meeting, but I just want to remind the community that may not have been following along the whole time. We conducted our safety town hall, so we want to make sure that it was virtual, in person. We want to have that culture where individuals know how to go to their school site safety councils, as well as our district safety meetings. Quite frankly, in the past, we've had very low attendance. And we want to make sure we have a culture that we're not having attendance spikes when events happen. We want to make sure that we have engagement along the way. So those town halls, by mixing up the formats, that was a good reflection. But we also want to make sure that we're reaching out to student populations directly, going to parent communities. So there's a way to pull people into the meetings we already have placed, but also go out and solicit the feedback. Safety walks is something we're doing. We want to make sure that that's more of the norm of making sure. I know our administrators do the safety walks, our custodians, but let's get more people involved. We heard that from the town halls as well. We made sure we're reminding people about the ID badges and being very relevant. We get relaxed. When an incident happens, we put them on, and then people start to say, oh, I forgot that. It's in my pocket, it's in the car. We got to make sure it's a culture that's non-negotiable. So you'll see some of the other immediate action steps that we took. This summer and this fall, I want to highlight some of the key feedback items that we heard through the town halls and our listening campaign that we're implementing. Every year we have a principal's retreat, an assistant principal institute, where we reflect on the year and we talk about what are the changes we want to make for the next school year. This year, one of the key topics is going to be around safety. So the conversations that we've been having all along, we're going to summarize that, reflect, have those dialogues, see what are we hearing at different sites, what are some of the best practices that our schools are putting there, and just have that space to make sure that we're sharing those best practices and we're implementing those as well. As we get back to school, we're going to make sure we're setting up additional trainings for staff around intruders reporting and safety. We are in the process of looking at how do we have two-part double check, as you talked about. Mr. Ferguson is saying that we have our campus supervisor and adults on campus that are checking for IDs, but how do we put technology to support that as well? So we've had some demonstrations from vendors. We're getting close to selecting a vendor. We'll be coming back to the board this summer with our recommend vendor so we can start to scan ID badges. And there's also other features that it integrates with our student information system is a top priority of ours, so that we can do easy, if we have a disaster drill, we can make a check-in system as well. We can do the check-out system. We know that that's the old paper and pencil model, as well as the technology can be challenging. I see a question. Do you want me to wait? No, if the board, it's up to the board if you'd like to jump in.
Just a clarifying question. So I'm really happy that we're going to explore electronic IDs. But one of the things that came up too is in the meantime, because I imagine that's going to take a while, have we put any thought into, sure we put thought into collecting IDs at the end of the year? I know it's tricky to do, and I don't know if there's a way to sort of integrate it into end of the year activities, but I know that's something we've talked about, is that essentially you just have your ID in perpetuity. So is there a realistic way on campuses to do that?
Yeah, that's something I know that if a student is going to a different school, we ask for that to be able to get that. And I know the schools have looked at changing the color of the card for the next year.
That would be great.
So that's something we're doing parallel. Our goal is to pilot a new ID system in the early fall at our 2 high schools to start off with. It will eventually be a district-wide initiative, but we want to make sure that we're focused on our largest high schools. Thank you. And yes, board members, if you want, feel free to jump in as I go along. We've also been talking about upgrades to facilities, fences, entrances, and gates. Monterey High School, we've already implemented an upgrade, so I want to thank the facilities team for being on that. So now there's a push-out gate in that quad area, so it's easy exit for the school without having to open up additional entrances as they get onto the school. Burbank High School, Mr. Ferguson and I did a site walk right after the incident, and we identified areas of, okay, how do we channel students and any visitor on campus to go through a couple of main gates. Mr. Maxwell, Mr. Cantwell, we've been working with our vendors, so that contract you approved actually at the last board meeting. So you will see some changes depending on the timeline of getting everything approved. So when you leave that garage, they will now be escorted out back to the street, so students will be coming back through the front door rather than coming through the side door. And then we looked at the separation of our track usage and making sure there's additional fencing so that if people are using our joint use, they don't come onto the campus when they don't need to.
So then that will sort of answer the question of, so then there's, if we have, like in the morning when the public can use the track, that'll still mean that they're interacting with students who might be there to utilize it as well. It'll just mean they can't access other elements of the campus.
Yeah, the new fencing will prevent them from coming onto the campus, but the track and field will still be available. We've been having conversations with the city about changing the hours, especially before school.
Okay, that's great. I would love to be updated on that.
That's what I was just going to ask too. It depends on who you talk to. Some people think the track is not open before school, and some do. And
I know Mr. Maxwell has been having. Have we landed on timing for before school for joint use, or is that still in progress? Still a conversation. And I know we have a joint walk on June 8th with President Ferguson, Vice President Weisberg, the mayor, and Vice Mayor to talk about some of these additional changes we'd like to make.
Yeah, and I thank you, Dr. Hill. And one, I do want to thank our city partners on that front, and to our facilities department and Dr. Hill, who I think have been really on top of this in a lot of ways to try and evaluate different systems, mechanisms to answer these challenges. They were numerous this year, right? What we dealt with in spring semester repeated in a number of, and echoed in different ways on different campuses in ways that were pretty shocking, and kind of denote a new normal, which is honestly unsettling. So I'm going to be very forthright with the community on that front, because as Dr. Hill and I were in front of town halls, we heard people were not holding back what they were afraid of. We are going to shelter some information, obviously, in this report due to the sensitive nature of safety planning. And we are going to continue to work with our city partners. There are a number of changes that are still necessary that our city partners can still deliver on. They have always been at the table, and they've always been very willing to engage. But we have very meaningful facility improvements that are likely needed to limit the number of entrances and access points to our secondary schools, and we still need our city partners' help on that front. So that is the reason why we are going to have the site walk. And I want to thank Dr. Weisberg as well, who's been helping to really corral and to rally and to inform our fellow policymakers on the other side. One of the things, though, I'm just going to jump in here just before we get ahead, is, a part of our discussion was about notification standards, right? That we've had these kind of situations occur where parents are like, wait a second, I'm hearing from my Burbank before I'm hearing from the school district. Why can I hear from my Burbank? And I'm saying it because previously we didn't say it, and it gets people uncomfortable. I get it, but I'm going to talk about this in very forthright ways. My Burbank tweets about something, parents pick up that tweet, and then guess what happens? Panic ensues. So how are we able to answer that? We aren't in many situations because we work directly with law enforcement, correct?
Correct.
So we are embargoed in what we can say, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's really challenging. So I for all the parents who said we have a communications problem, I want to tell you we don't. What we do is cooperate with law enforcement while they manage and secure the situation, while my Burbank has free license, once again under the First Amendment, to inform. We don't hate that. We wish, once again, they would work with us. A few board meetings, I asked for them to reach out. Have they reached out yet?
Not to me.
Have they reached out to any member of administration who is present tonight? No, they have not. Okay, so this is a challenge, ladies and gentlemen. This district has millions in resources that we use to educate our children every day. We have very limited resources to improve facilities, to change programs. It's going to take a pilot program for student IDs to be deployed. Can we get real? My Burbank, I am asking you to come to the table and to help us keep our students and our families safe, where we can agree to release times, you name it. We don't want to censor, but we do need time to secure our campus communities, to inform our parents before chaos ensues. And we've seen it happen year after year because of tweets. One of the things I do think we need to move forward on, and we've communicated about this, again, I'm not sure how much in your process you've been able to suss it out, and it's been really challenging for me to be able to connect with you to do this, so it's not for a lack of effort on your part, Dr. Hill, is communication standards. Can we confer to parents at the beginning of the year in the packet, hey, in 30 minutes you will get a text message from the district. In an hour after an incident, we will do X, Y, and Z. That, I have to say, I don't think the police department should be driving on at that point. We should be able to communicate minimum amounts of information in 30 minutes and an hour after an incident. Are we able to do something to that effect to get parents that guarantee?
Yes, we will make sure we implement that we have standard programs. And just for the parents to know and the community to know, the first one's going to be vague. It's going to say there was an incident on campus. We're doing an investigation. All is safe, or we are on lockdown. We would be able to tell you the tiers of we are safe or we're on lockdown. More information will come at the next update, and that's usually will give us the time to get that. In the past, what we did was, okay, let's get all the information and give that to parents. But we know now with texting and social media, the minute something happens, it's out there. So we will definitely have that discussion. We're having that discussion at our end of year principal retreat, talking about what those protocols are and have a standard template that all school sites can say. So that first one is like, this is what we know. Mm-hmm. And Ms. Ponser-Kamkar has given some suggestions on this as well. It's like, this is what we know. This is what we're doing, and this is what we're do next. This is when you get the next update. And so it aligns exactly to what you've discussed. So we'll make sure we have those protocols. Because usually it's that second message, usually our second message, which takes longer, is because we're figuring everything out, but we have to get that first message out there because people know that we're actually doing something.
And I'd be interested to hear what that feedback looked like. So if we can circle back on what that is, I think it's important we keep the community along in this conversation and not disappear off. Sponsor Camp Car.
Thank you. So I was going to ask a question about the training that happens at kind of elementary, middle, high, and I'm curious how the conversation goes with high schoolers, because I do know that, and maybe even middle schoolers, that this issue of as soon as something happens on a campus, kids are texting each other, they're texting their parents, they're texting everyone in the world, and probably posting it on social media. Like, is that part of the training that it's like, it's maybe not helpful from a safety perspective for kids to be doing that, or is that not discussed?
I don't believe, has that been discussed about stay off? Okay. Why don't you come up here? I'm gonna, Ms. Cashman, our Director of Student Services.
Good evening. As far as the students staying off the phones during emergency procedures and drills, we always talk to them about that, about not using their phones, but you can't control that when you're a small group of adults managing a whole school and a drill. So it's a very difficult thing to manage.
But so as part of run, hide, fight, you talk about when you're running and hiding, you want your cell phones away because you don't want it you want it pinging, you want it off, you want it quiet. But I think what we can do is reinforce why. And I know we talk about it's for your safety, but I think sitting down and saying that's just creating chaos for people that are trying to help us in that situation. So that's.
I think maybe this is just my addled middle school teacher brain. I think it's going to be very hard to get kids to stay off their phones, but I think, one, that's helpful, but two, however we're communicating to parents at the beginning of the year along the lines of like, hey, the first text is going to be general, the second one, whatever, I think we can also say, hey, parents, you're probably, if something happens and you get texts from your kids, please know that we are also working at the same time to address it. While you may not hear anything from us immediately because the police have asked us not to, that does not mean we're not doing something. So that conversation we've had about sort of giving parents a heads up of like, these are the steps that are happening, even if you don't see them happening. I think the more we can do that, I think it'll be also better than what we're hearing from parents, which is like, how come I saw, it's like, of course your child is gonna text you before we can get to you. But while they're texting you, here's what we're doing. I think that will help chip away at some of this. And look, I think we've learned a lot of valuable lessons this year about, to your point, how we respond and how the first text saying you'll get a more detailed, et cetera, but I think the more we can front load it too, and maybe there's even a link on the website people can go to go, oh, here are the steps. I think the more we can sort of make it all clear, I think it will really help with, I just don't think it's a war we can win to push back on like the social media, because how do you do that? But I do think reminding them that it doesn't help, it hurts, is helpful too.
Yeah, and I will say also, we saw, and we're going to go to the second half of the report. We saw what social media does. We've seen it routinely. We saw it years ago at Burbank High in an incident that occurred there. We've seen it now this year. Blow situations up. I agree that I don't think we can take phones from kids in this moment. Frankly, I don't want to, just to be honest. My Burbank can behave better. I'm on that point clearly, but it's not funny. It's serious. They are absolutely contributing to chaotic situations on our school sites, and I had to stand up, I'm sorry, in front of our community with our superintendent and receive that angst. They're not answerable to that. I am. Grew up here, went to these schools during Columbine. That was a lot of our experiences. You know what? I'm sorry, it is different. We all care about these kids, but we've all been yelled at different amounts and been accountable at different amounts for these moments, and we've got to be accountable for this now. So that to me is important. I would still like to see my Burbank come to the table. And again, if we're going to hire as schools Ross Benson to come and take photos of us, I'm sorry. I think that should be held off until we get agreements. until we get agreements, frankly, again, I'm talking about hiring agreements, about professional photography. I want to understand that if we're going to invite folks on the campus, they're going to be tweeting about, I really want to understand how much of a partner they can be with us in these moments. We don't have to, once again, say no to anything that they say. It would be helpful if they worked with us, if they informed us, if they worked with us on tone, potentially. Gosh, that would be great. When we're talking about these text messages in particular, or these notifications to parents, however they are deemed. Okay, I think it obviously has to be multi-prone due to the fact that it's email, text message. Some families have access to some avenues, others don't. We're talking about some campuses like when we learned about the girls softball team at Burroughs not being accessible for the period of time during the duration of their walk. You know, and the answer from a site principal there was, we have a system, Blackboard. They were using Blackboard, I believe, correct?
Blackboard and Remind. Yeah.
Right. So part of my concern is, okay, so something happens on a campus, we notify. One, I think the format of those messages we should walk through with potential parent leaders. What does that look like? You know, text one, what does that look like? What's the most essential information you want to know as a parent then? I think that would be a good check-in. I think that check-in's different for elementary kids than it is for secondary. And I think we differentiate that, and we make those standards crystal clear in that packet. So I like the idea of different strategies, but I think we need to be very forthright in that we're going to be communicating different ways. But the second is you know, what happens when kids scatter? What is the plan, right? When kids run off school sites, where's that rendezvous point? If they did throw their phone. I mean, we heard with the girls softball team when they're offline, how scary that is in those moments. What are we doing to the kids who scatter? What is the strategy for that? And how do we get people back in touch with their parents? So, you know, do we notify kids that there are designated phone access points, designated internet access? I mean, everybody gets where a Starbucks is and can do their best, but if you've thrown your device away, you've thrown your device away. So how do we set up rendezvous points, frankly, for especially open campuses like Burroughs, which will continue to be open access points because students have to cross to get to, and there's some work being done, I guess, to minimize that, right?
Right.
So what can we do on that point?
So on that one, I think all of our sites have an evacuation meetup point, and so we need to make sure students know that if you're off campus and something happens, that's where you go. Mm-hmm. That's where you're going to find the administrators. That's where we're going to have the police are going to be, and our response team is going to be at the school site, but they're also going to be at our evacuation point. Great. So those reminders are something that we can reinforce as we head into the next school year and continue to do that.
And if you are off-site when that access point or that rendezvous point is triggered, what do you do then? Right? Like, so just, I want to, that was illustrated to us in the public comment and the feedback was, hey, what about this student segment? What about this student segment? I want a plan for each student segment.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay.
And then if we go to the slides to your point in question, go ahead, sir.
Just, and I do appreciate all the feedback that some of you have been kind of going through this. My question is regarding the response time from law enforcement. Have we done assessments in terms of not only time, but if there are any schools that are challenging for them to get into? You know, you heard about what happened in Texas and how long it took the law enforcement to get this.
In microphone?
Microphone.
Yes. Uvalde, right?
Sorry. Yeah, and it's unfortunate we have to have these conversations, but it does matter. And I'm curious if we've had assessment with our police department, which schools are challenging, what we're doing about it. You know, I know we're a small town, but at the same time, you know, again, we talked about congestion, entry points. Right. I just wanted a little feedback on that.
Absolutely. And on our district website, we have a video from last summer when the Burbank Police Department talked about response time and training. I just want to remind the community that we are very fortunate here in Burbank. Our Burbank Police Department is well-trained, extremely valuable partners with us. They do trainings and safety walks on our school sites. The response time is less than 3 minutes to get to our school sites. They are there when we need us, and they are prepared and they're trained to take action. So I just want to reassure the community that we live in a very amazing city with amazing law enforcement that works with us, prepares with us, and we're constantly looking at what we're doing to make it better.
And they also work graduations, our graduation ceremonies as well. So I do want to say thank you to those who were standing on the field. We did, frankly, need them at some point. Again, ridiculous, but we did. So again, and they handled it in a highly professional way that kept the ceremony central and kids central. Good for them.
Yep.
So this has been a good partnership, but we've got more work to do.
So as far as access points on the slide, you see the next bullet point really focuses on ingress and egress. And we're talking specifically about John Burroughs High School. I want to thank outgoing principal Dr. Chambers. This was his idea, and he worked with incoming principal Noop, as well as our facilities team and technology team and Dr. Paramo. We have some classrooms that have always been across the street, and so that creates more of an open campus. Every 50 minutes, you're going to have people moving back and forth. And so he's been looking at how to utilize classroom space, reimagine classroom space, so that our core classes are going to be on the main campus, and then you have more assessments and computer labs and others at those portables. And it may fluctuate based on enrollment. If enrollment goes up, we may have to open a couple classrooms, but a goal is for next year to have all the core classrooms there, and that way you can have more of a closed campus. You're not going to be going through Bear Alley to get onto the campus. You'll be going through the front doors. As we're putting in scanners, you can have much tighter security. So I want to thank the entire team. This is something that Principal Madrigal was talking about several years ago, and just being creative and continue to work on it. We're going to make sure that, unfortunately, I would say we have to realize that's the reality. We need to have more closed campuses to keep our staff and students safe. And so this was one of the priorities. As we look at the facilities master plan, we'll look at longer term plans to continue to do that, but this is going to be immediate change we'll be making.
And I do want to celebrate your leadership on this too. Because again, I'm sorry, this did take a lot. This was a lot of top down, and when we did campus walks, or did the campus walk in particular, there was a lot of kind of, we need to focus on here. Again, not that campuses are fundamentally insecure, but identifying risks, that potentially exist. We can't help creativity on the other side of this issue, but we've got to outthink it. So getting our kids onto that one school site, that took a lot of work and vision. So thank you.
Thank you. So on the next slide is going to be some. Let's see. All right. Some additional summer and fall changes. I won't go through all of these, but you can see on the slide, like we've talked about some of these already, of increased cameras on campuses. This always helps. It helps with vandalism. Unfortunately, at the end of the school year, we saw a horrific senior prank turn into vandalism at John Burroughs High School. We're going to be upgrading camera systems over the summer until the fall at John Burroughs High School. It doesn't stop behavior, but hopefully people will realize that we will record you and we will catch you and we'll persecute you. It's not okay. These aren't jokes. These are illegal vandalism acts, and we want to make sure that we do that. It will help with safety. So any layer we can add to our sites, we're looking at those different layers.
And if I could also ask that we supplement that with a camera policy related to video footage. Who has access to that? There's been moments where, I've certainly asked for footage and that footage has not been provided. So, I think the board members in particular should be able to access this footage, but I want to know who does have access, how long we're storing it, and that should be a policy.
Just because I know people watch these meetings with ill intentions, I believe you meant to say prosecute, not persecute.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Just don't want that to come back.
Yes.
In some horrible
Prosecute.
tweet.
I appreciate that. I apologize for the slip. Next one is, we talked about the safety walk on the 8th, continued partnership with the city. I talked about the WeTip hotline earlier, so each school site is working on a Google form that they can push out to their students and staff. That's an easier form for our students to use, and so we'll have both options for students. The WeTip hotline is completely anonymous. Google form, it will be confidential form, but there's pros and cons of each. We're going to be talking about implementing a clear bag policy. If you go to any major event anywhere now, you have to have a clear bag. So if we look at homecoming and proms and sporting events, so we want to have that conversation this fall and how we can shift to that. And then just continue to build and enhance our safety protocols, training. As I talked about the long-term master plan, safety is a key component that we're doing, an eye towards that as well. And then some additional next steps of, I started off the presentation really talking about how do we go to people and get their feedback and also pull people into our meetings so that we have this ongoing dialogue. So we'll always be looking at ways to do that. We want to encourage the community to continue to engage with us and give us their suggestions, as well as our employees, our students, and our families. And then finally, we always have an annual safety plan. Now that we have it's either student affairs or administrative affairs, we can talk about the appropriate subcommittee to have a deeper dive of our safety plans at that meeting.
Something I'd like to have more conversation about, and I think Ms. Cashman would be involved in this, is we talked about this a while ago, but being able to see, I can't remember when, a sort of monthly overview of incidents on each campus. Anything that is reported. And again, we should talk about the feasibility of this, but I think what it'll allow us to do is start to identify trends. If we see something happening a lot on one campus, that it gives us the ability to be responsive and say, hey, is there something that we can be doing on this site that we're not doing? And maybe it's not even a facilities issue, right? But maybe it's a DEI issue, maybe it's a whatever, but I think that will help us sort of track throughout the year. And I think once a month, the conversation would be like, how often is doable? But I think it's important for us so we can sort of track and see areas that we need to be, if we're seeing a lot of vandalism, okay, well, maybe we need to have a conversation about where the cameras are placed. I don't know what it would be, but I think it'll be helpful for us. But again, I'm sure it's a lot of work, so we should talk about like how often is realistic. But I'd love to see that in some capacity.
Well, and as a follow-up to that, how do we, when we enter into Aries, a student profile, right, on discipline, is there, again, counseling master plan, a part of what we discussed in the counseling master plan is that, hey, we need to break down certain interventions with certain coding to be able to pull reports fast. It doesn't take too long to pull a query. It does take time to redact, it takes time to review, but is the taxonomy that we're using for coding currently able to give us that information? If so, can we overhaul that over the summer?
Right. So that's something we've talked about, especially as we transition to the next part around the reporting of assaults and harassment. Are there unique codes that we can do? And so I'll transition to that right now. Before I do, I don't want to transition too fast. An additional questions just on the campus safety item. The next topic we're talking about is addressing sexual assault allegations. So,
for those of you that are working on this specifically, had conversations about utilizing the campus population at each place, kind of that see something, say something, if something doesn't look right, it's probably not, don't be afraid to speak up, maybe there is a texting site for those kinds of things. I keep seeing the same guy walking back and forth. Somebody needs to know about this. It's one of the things that living here in Burbank, I know from growing up with friends who are police officers or work in the comm center, people call the police all the time for whatever. Yeah. And that same ideology needs to be persistent in the school site too. The kids, the staff, hey, I've never seen that guy on this campus before. Does he belong or she belong here? I didn't mean to be gender specific, but and so it's okay to speak up. I'm not going to get in trouble. It's part of the safety of my campus for me to say something. I think that's something that needs to be put out to the kids. Have an assembly, age appropriate, something so that we talk about how do we keep ourselves safe or safer.
Right. So we definitely have been reinforcing that communication our principals have, but that's something that's ongoing that we need to continue to do. The Sandy Hook Promise has a 2-part program called Say Hello. So it's one about making connections with everybody. So adults and students, making sure you're connecting with everyone on campus. And then there's See Something, Say Something. And so there's some protocols that we've been able to push out, but that is, we have to continue to do that. And that's why we're also expanding. We have the WeTip hotline where you can call or you can click a form, or these Google forms will be another one that we're going to make easy for students to be able to report. So it's having the mindset to say something and then making it easy for individuals to report.
We had a speaker at 5 Star to talk about that specifically, where he said, there's just plain bad people who will get the idea that coming onto a school campus to do whatever horrible thing would be fun or give them notoriety or whatever. Or there's people who belong to the school community, have some kind of grudge or need to pay somebody back, and that's a terrible way to put it. And he was talking about if the first group of people, just the generally bad people, know, hey, people in Burbank are paying attention, they're watching, I'm more than likely to get caught, that's a deterrent. They will less likely come onto our campuses, according to this gentleman's thought process. And then the other folks are, like you're talking about, if you take the time, like with our pride flag saying you're welcome here, but if you take the time to, I think we had a program in Montebello called 15 Seconds or...
Every 15 minutes.
No.
No?
It was totally different.
Straight
Not every, but like, it takes 3 seconds to say, hey, I noticed you're eating lunch by yourself today. Why don't you come join us? Or the buddy benches, Yeah, sort of utilize that so that we don't have an issue with someone feeling not a part of the community or disgruntled, that those thoughts and feelings may get out before it escalates into something horrific. So I think those kinds of programs are not costly, and they would be things we could do on our school sites that would help, again, work from within to keep our campuses safe. Just a thought.
So if changing the next topic is really around addressing sexual assault allegations, if we get the slides back up. As President Ferguson was talking about earlier, we went into our student information system, ARIES, and we did searches multiple ways. We did it by the victim codes, by discipline codes, by keywords to identify anything that has been reported to school employees that was recorded in our student information system over the last 3 years. We knew back in March, we were seeing on social media and we saw in the Burbank Leader that people were reporting 50 plus allegations of sexual assault happening and nothing being done. And so we wanted to look in our data. You will see on the slide that it's not over 50 plus cases. So 2 things I want to just stress on that. Number one is that if you're a victim of sexual assault or harassment or abuse, and you feel like you've reported and your situation was not addressed appropriately, you have a school board, you have a superintendent, you have school staff that we want to hear that. And we want to support you and engage, because we've made that offer since March. I haven't had a single person come forward to me, and I don't believe board members have as well. We need to know that. If you don't want to come to the school district, please go to the school police department. We also have Burbank Family Service Agency. We want you to go somewhere where you're being heard and supported. But there were allegations made that individuals were not being supported, and so we went back and looked at the data, and we looked at keywords as well, not just based on codes. So we want to make sure we're not missing anybody. So that's the number one. The second thing we're going to do is, as Mr. Ferguson was saying, is are there additional ways to standardize how we're reporting and how we're coding so we can pull this data much faster and can we review it more frequently? So we will be doing that. And so the chart that you see in front of me is based on the data that's in our system. So one, we looked at unwanted touching. And so you see over the last 3 years, we had 7 cases of those, and we looked at the discipline and how it was resolved and making sure it was addressed. There's questions about Title IX investigations. So we're putting the asterisk here is if it's an informal or a formal. Formal is you have a complainant that comes forward, and we start the process, and there's a very structured process where you have different people taking each component of that Title IX investigation. So it's a checks and balances through the process all the way. We haven't had any formal investigations on that. What we've had is informal. So we get, here's a concern that's raised to us, and so we start the process, and it's deemed that it doesn't rise to that next level, but we still go through the process. And so that's something that we've addressed. So it's student versus student. So you see, of the unwanted touching, 2 of those went to our Title IX officer, and so he went through the process and resolved the situation through that. Inappropriate sexual comments, we've had those. We've had 6 of those. Those didn't rise to either an informal, it's more handled at a discipline level at the school site level. Obscene act and the sexual assault off campus. The Obscene Act was also off campus, but it came to us on campus. And given the nature of that, we did the informal Title IX process, and we were able to provide discipline of suspension on that based on the nature of the Obscene Act. And then the sexual assault off campuses, we took those 5 through the whole process. As far as the discipline and some of the frustration and pain that we heard in March was that if it's off campus, it usually is handled through a police and a legal matter, unless there's a clear nexus on campus where we can do discipline. And so those usually don't result in suspensions or expulsions. But what we do is make sure that what we call is, it's like a stay away or a cease and desist to make sure that the victim does not have to worry about interacting with the alleged perpetrator. We're making sure that we're making those accommodations, we're providing counseling, and I'll go into more details about what we do. So whether it's criminal or not, we still want to make sure that we're providing resources and support for our students. Dr. Weiss.
Thank you. 2 questions. So, you may be speaking to this later, but there's a clear disconnect between the numbers that we heard about, and I too got no response and have continued to reach out and ask. I did get one student response. She now lives in Australia. So I'll try, it's like a 16-hour difference, who knows?
Yeah.
It's the future. So I would love to think about and talk more about like why does that disconnect exist as far as, and I think this goes back to the thing we talked about earlier, which is how can we better make the process transparent so that people know what's going on, even if they're not hearing from us all the time. And we've talked about this before, like the process was followed, but I think it was opaque because for a million reasons, right? People are overworked, there's cross lines of communication, but if there's something that somebody can look at and say, okay, I'm here, and then I'm going to be here. And we talked about this also, like we can't tell families if someone is suspended or expelled, right? But I don't think parents know that. So when they don't hear about what we've done in a disciplinary fashion, they think nothing happened, but something did happen. So I think the more we can be clear, I think it'll be helpful for victims, helpful for anybody who's involved in the process, just so that they can see, okay, I'm right here right now, and here's going to be the next step, and maybe it's going to take X number of days to do, but I think that would help. But I to your last point, I think it's going to be really important to figure out how we can better support social emotionally people who have gone through something. I mean, we said this a lot. There's a difference between someone not being happy with the result and us not doing our due diligence. And so the more that we can sort of highlight the steps we're taking, I think hopefully we'll be able to chip away at that. But I also want to make sure that we're honoring people's experiences however we can. And it sounds like that's an area where we can be doing a better job. So just thinking about creating that transparency is important.
And I want to kind of piggyback on that comment a little bit. So one, I think from my experience hearing the presentations repeatedly, we spent a lot of time explaining what we had jurisdiction over and what we didn't. You explained that a little bit, obviously, in your presentation. But again, I think it is about explaining process, as Dr. Weisberg alluded to, but I think it also is about conveying what our very real role is in certain moments, right? It is our job as soon as we are notified of a situation to gather as much information as possible and then to hand it off to law enforcement for their review and their process. We are not responsible, nor do we have the tools to conduct a full investigation, especially something that would be criminal in any case. So I think that's important, and I think we can say investigation launched, investigation not launched. But the challenge is that these schools are really tiny communities. And so even reviewing the phase of where things are at can often undermine an issue. If we have an incident on a campus and we say, we can't discuss it because it's under investigation, you've got staff and students and everybody messaging whose fault was it. And usually by lunch, there's a general consensus, or about 2 hours later. So this is where our small townism kind of works against us. But I think we can do status generally. I think we can say investigation ongoing, there are no investigations at this time. And kind of get to a status where, again, we're just informing our job is to collect and hand off. We are in the process of gathering information. That information has been handed off. That's it. So, and really, if there was an incident, it is, as you said, it's directly related to a on-campus incident, 9/10, or walking home from school, correct? So those situations are clear. We discipline rather quickly in those situations, within days, if not the day of, if a student is missing from school. So I think it's these kind of gray areas where, again, we have longer reporting timelines, or we have kind of concerns about our reporting mechanisms. But, I think it is helpful to just be able to, again, be very clear and keep it limited in what we offer, but also very clear. Hand it off, not. Investigating, not.
On the next slide, and it talks to President Ferguson and Vice President Weisberg's comments about the protocols. So I want to acknowledge our assistant principal at John Burroughs, Ms. Tori Caseo. She took our protocols that we've been following and said, okay, let's look from a lens of how do we provide support and empathy and focus on it's the victim-centered, because there's a lot of that procedure, and we talked about it in March, how it can feel cold and it doesn't feel supportive. So she did a lot of lifting on this. She shared it with the colleagues, assistant principals. Dr. Paramo had a lot involved in it, Ms. Cashman. So I want to thank all of them I don't want to take credit for the work that I'm going to walk through, but I want to be very visible and transparent about that work. And historically, we've taken a lot of our protocols, we just do it as employees and staff. We haven't talked about it publicly, and I think given the moment we're in, we should talk about how we do that. So we do refine and we review these, and we want feedback as we go before an incident happens, and hopefully an incident doesn't happen again, but we want to make sure we have protocols in place to address. But this is to help assist, and there's variations on how we do it. But the number one thing, and a lot of we do it human nature, we acknowledge the pain of the victim and we work them. They're coming forward to tell their story that is traumatic, and there is a lot of research and data that shows that a lot of people feel like they're not going to be believed, and that's why they're not going to report. And that's why I started this part of the presentation saying, if you have had an incident and you have not felt heard or you have not felt comfortable reporting, please know that this school district, the board, myself, school site staff, district staff, we're all here to support and help you. And if for some reason you feel like that's a barrier, please go to the Burbank Police Department or go somewhere where you can report. And so we're going to acknowledge and support that, and we want to make sure that as we do our training that we're continuing to do that. And continue to empathize through that. There's a comment earlier about the reporting aspect of it. So this is an illustration of how we do that. The likely to occur, as I said earlier, is that not all cases need a risk assessment, which is that last step, but the other ones absolutely are going to happen. So we any staff that has that notifies the administrator at that site, and also the administrator at the district office. Is there a Title IX UCP officer? And then we start investigating that and supporting that. We contact our SROs and our Burbank Police Department to support us in that, so that we are lockstep together working through this at the same time. And we don't want to make a decision whether it is or is not something that rises to the next level. We take it like every time we go down the path until someone says it's not that level. So when I talk about formal investigation or informal, it always starts as this formal, as a mandated reporter. And then we go down to the path based on the evidence and the investigation. And so then you can see the steps that we're taking on our reporting procedures. As we're doing this, and this is not necessarily linear, this is happening as we're going, making sure resources are available. As as you talked about, Mr. Ferguson and Ms. Weisberg, of explaining what happens next to the level that we can. And so that's something we're going to make sure we're enforcing. Like, this is what we're doing, this is what we can say, and this is what we can't say. We've done that consistently in the past, but we need to make sure we overemphasize that. And I think that's the key thing. And we're going to continue to look at that. And then empowering and that follow-up. The week after, the month after, throughout the semester, making sure there's that follow through. And then there's more work to always be done on this, and so I want to make sure we're highlighting that. We talked about this in March as well, and Burbank Family Service Agency, Lori Blake, I want to give her a great appreciation. Immediately she says, what do you need? How can we help? And so we've talked about bringing them in, talking with the students and the parents to go through the process with us. They are trained in different skill sets, so as we're going through the investigation phase of the process, they can talk about the language we're using, how we're providing the supports and resources. So I want to see where appropriate to bring them into the conversation with us. Ongoing trauma-informed training. I mentioned earlier at the Assistant Principal and Principal Institute, we're going to be reviewing these protocols, talking through what are other examples, best practices we should be embedding into this, lessons learned. I already mentioned the consistent coding in our student information system of areas so we can pull these reports and then we can constantly review the data as it's happening. I know the board has asked for updates going forward on a frequent basis, and so we'll be able to do that through the Student Affairs Subcommittee. Any questions on this section?
Thank you. One of the things that we heard in March was not only from a few victims, but also from their friends, right? Or folks that were hearing secondhand reports or that maybe felt like they saw something inappropriate and the victim had not been or had not reported. And so I'm curious, obviously there's like a mandated reporter piece of that, but how is that dealt with any differently than a student coming in and reporting their own sexual assault or assault of intent?
We follow the same protocol, and so when that comes forward, and so some of this data, I did take that out because someone said, I heard this, it was logged in our student information system, they did follow-up questioning, and it was usually, I heard this from somebody else, or I heard something, and there's nothing. So we still follow through. It's like, where did you hear this? Who did you hear? Then we follow up with any individuals that we can based on that. So again, for students, if you don't worry about if you like, I heard this, I don't know if it's true or not, or I don't know if I have all the details, that's okay. Report it to your teacher, report it to your administrator. We will take the step of making sure that we do our investigation. We want to hear those concerns.
I will say, so one, when we talked about the data polls related specifically to sexual assault, you and I had a conversation over the phone about those. We talked about independently verifying those polls, those queries. Were you able to do that with other people polling independent of you?
I did it with a senior leadership team, but if the board wants to, we talked about if, based on this, if there need to be an outside review of that, that's something we can do, but based on the numbers and what we looked at and documentation, did not feel like we needed to do that. Okay. If we had individuals that were coming forward to us and say, like, my case was not handled appropriately, then I think that's where we can do an independent review, but I'll defer to the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we, as a result of some of the feedback we heard during these meetings, again, very forthright commentary on what was said. We looked, and in case there was any nefarious action, I did ask for a backup. Again, I believe that people took that seriously, that this data was double checked. So again, we're not sweeping anything under the rug, and I think this board has been very forthright, and this leadership team, frankly, in trying to get to very clear points of information for us to be able to work off of. So I did want to talk about that in particular because there is a fundamental mistrust in this system. I do think that each campus needs to discuss year by year. We are seeing, for instance, we just got emails about John Muir and how a population is ballooning in certain areas and things. We're going to have different approaches on reporting by community, by culture. And we're going to have to realize that, snitches get stitches, right? Has been a long-standing hideous thing, right? That's kept a lot of people from doing good things and right things that would have kept people from getting hurt. But that's a mentality in our culture that we work against actively. But we work against that differently culture to culture. We work against it because it means different things. The implications mean different things if you violate that. So I think that needs to also be a part of this if we're going to get to some reporting. And also, again, some sort of two-step verification point for people who do report. Hey, I told blah and I told blah. Who are your two adults that you told, right? If you don't, or if you don't feel comfortable telling, everybody is trained, yes, but not everybody is ready to do that. It's horrifying. It's horrifying to receive that information. Of course, you want to do everything you can in that moment, but it's a lot. So how do we make sure there's a receipt tape for student reporting? I think that counts. So that was just a part of it, and I think we need to figure out what that looks like, and if that's an app, if that's students deserve receipts.
Yep.
And that was kind of critical feedback during this process. I don't think anybody denies wanting to give them that.
Right.
But that timestamps this process for us. It allows us to understand the nature of it at a greater level, and it doesn't allow. And then the last thing, and I saw, we've seen this year in particular entire campus communities ripped apart by accusations. Right, the pain that people feel by not being seen, the pain of what it is to be either accused, friends of the accused, you name it. Painful experiences all around. And what I have said to you individually, Dr. Hill, as you and I have worked closely throughout this process is, at the end of the day, no matter what, lives are ruined. That's what the outcome of this is. Educators, you name it, have had years, of stress added to their lives over the course of days of existence on these school sites and performing roles. And we do our best to accommodate that, but we need resolution strategies to de-escalate campus communities when they reach that crisis point. Because when, one, I don't want to take away anybody's pursuit of justice. I think that's critical. But you know what? I do think that different demonstrations, different public demonstrations are received differently by those who perpetrate, but also by those who have been victimized. They may not want to have that volume occur and reaction occur if they report. And so our campus communities need a plan to de-escalate those situations in the ways that they can. Everybody, I think, tried in ways that they could. Very hard situations all around. But you can't tell me, right, that some people weren't impacted or perceived that this wasn't controlled in some way, shape, or form or managed in the way that it should. I think, again, we did all we could. But I think it's something to certainly learn from, and each campus, especially at the secondary level, should have plans for this. I'm sorry. And Ms. Sponsor Kamkar, who's been waiting patiently, thank you.
No, that's, to piggyback on that, I think, I can really appreciate the protocol that's been outlined here, especially that the last one is checking in with the student and their family or their family within the first month of receiving the report, right? And I think that might be part of what President Ferguson is talking about is how can you give them an update in a way that protects all of the students involved or all the parties involved, while still getting a sense of closure. Because one thing that people may not have seen is that I think either individually or I think individually, like we all followed up with you and staff on everyone who came forward at that March board meeting to understand the circumstances, to understand what the results were there and how those things were resolved. And because I know I was very emotional at that meeting, because it was all a big surprise to me, right? I felt pretty blindsided by it, and so I certainly felt better. Is not right the word, but maybe more at ease, knowing what the process was, knowing that it had been followed up on, knowing that that we knew who these individuals were, who the students were, what had happened with them. And so I would love to figure out a way to give those students that same kind of resolution at the end of this. And so maybe that's part of step 7, maybe that's a step 8, is being able to come back and say, this is what this is what has been done generally in these kinds of situations and how we're moving forward. So, thanks.
Microphone. Any other questions on this front? Dr. Weisberg.
Thank you to Mr. Maxwell and Mr. Cantwell. You do, just generally, and Dr. Hill and everybody who is involved in looking at this for the first part, second part, for all of it, it's an enormous amount of work.
Got it. We will have a report back, obviously, in a year on this in particular, so highlighting that from the report. I think, again, believe it or not, we are learning from all of this. As many of these situations keep happening, we are learning. So again, if you're a community partner who has further feedback, feel free to reach out to the members of the board of the district's administration. We certainly look forward to hearing your feedback and your support as we continue to review this. And thank you to everybody who is making this possible and doing these improvements over the course of the summer. If we can get also a report back in August on the ID system in particular, and I do want to emphasize that the IDs are focused at the high school level because we do have secured doors at the elementary schools and a single check-in point.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, so high schools, middle schools are for the most part one access point, single access, but are single access point. But high schools, that's where, multiple access points, that's where we're doing the ID pilot. So that's why elementary school kids aren't getting IDs, but also that makes sense.
And just to clarify, we will be purchasing licenses for the whole district, but as we roll it out, we're going to prioritize the high schools. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's just wise because we're going to come across issues in this process. So thank you. And thank you to Ms. Cashman as well. Okay, with that, we will go on to Votorama.
11A.
Item 11A, approval of the permanent substitute employee salary compensation increase.
Board President Ferguson.
Dr. Weisberg.
I move that we approve the permanent substitute employee salary compensation increase as presented.
Second. Moved by Dr. Weisberg, seconded by Dr. Agakanian to approve the substitute employee salary compensation increase. Any further discussion on this item?
I just have a question, and I'm sorry I didn't ask this earlier. Permanent substitute flew by me.
Let me clarify the language. We've been on a year-to-year basis, starting with COVID, we temporarily increased our substitute compensation. The term permanent is like, this will be our new substitute rate. So it's not about permanent substitute. It's a permanent rate. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, been moved. Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries 5-0. On to item 11B, approval of designation of high school representatives, and there is an amendment on the desk, so I will actually read this motion if you don't mind, unless you have the amendment. Do you have?
I do.
Yes, you, great.
I got it up.
Well, there you go. Obviously, Ms. Tabbitt's excited about this one, so we'll give it to her.
Every year, I'm excited about this
It's
one.
yours, I know.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see. I move that the Board of Education approve the designation of principals Julie Markison and Kenny Knoop as the representatives of Burbank High and John Burroughs High School, and assistant principals John Wells, teacher and special assignment, and Jessica Pulaski. Did I say her last name right?
Mhm.
Assistant principal at John Burroughs, as designated as the CIF representatives for both of our high school and the Pacific League. I kind of messed that up, but that's the general gist of it.
Second.
Thank you.
Moved by Ms. Tabbitt, seconded by Ms. Ponser-Kamkar. Before we go to a vote, I will ask, CIF is regulating some pretty and entering into some pretty interesting conversations recently about transgender athletes, et cetera, and I would like to know a little bit more about what votes are happening. I feel a little distant from what's happening with our representatives, and I don't know what they're voting on. I trust them, inherently, because I know what their values are, but I don't know what's happening, and I'm discovering things on CBS before I'm hearing about it from us, and I'm accountable for it. So if we could just get those reports.
Yeah.
You okay?
Love it.
I was like, you looked concerned with
No,
getting
no,
reports
I
on this.
wanted
I'm
to
like,
add to
really,
that,
girl?
There's also some considerations of new sports.
New sport.
Just wondering if we could get a list of what our league is looking at.
Like ultimate frisbee kind of new sports?
Girls flag football.
Nice.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
Game on.
just wondering what it's
Well, especially for if there's considerations about facility needs long term,
yeah.
it's a good conversation to have
It
for
is.
sure.
So just wondering what's going on.
Okay.
In the Foothill League.
And I do want to say I realize it's an extra layer of work, so it doesn't need to be extra prescriptive. But if they have minutes that they can just redistribute, that would be great. Just forward. That way we're not asking for an additional layer, but we're informed. That would be great. Okay, great. Any further discussion on that item? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. On to item 11C, approval of the elementary school arts instructor and bilingual translator salary compensation increase.
Board President Ferguson.
Dr. Weisberg.
I move that we approve the elementary school arts instructor and bilingual translator salary compensation increase as presented.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Weisberg, seconded by Dr. Agakanian, to approve the translator salary compensation increase. Further discussion on this item. Dr. Hill, if you could give just briefly some background on this.
Yes. The first one on the elementary school arts instructor. So we have a rate for our secondary schools, but we have not had one for the elementary schools. And with Prop 28 rolling out, we are still waiting for the specific details of how to implement Prop 28. So for our elected officials watching, we are waiting for that through the June budget. As soon as we get that guidance, we will be very appreciative. But in order to be able to expand our arts programs at the elementary level, we established this position and the rate, and we did benchmark this against other districts. And then the second one is our bilingual translator salary. It doesn't fall on an employee salary schedule. This is separate, and so as we've been doing job study with CSEA, this would not have been part of it. So we used the same districts, and we did a job study on that. And so we're upping the rate based on what our comparable average, and we're getting positions in the district to average. So this is average of other districts that are comparable.
Thank you. I do want to get quick reports like that whenever we're talking about employee increases or bonuses or any of those things that we get lovingly accused of at times. But this is important, and keeping compensation on par also so voters see that when they vote for something, it does come to the local level and it does impact local decision making. I just want to get little tidbits, a little bit clear on that for those who aren't going to take the time to read the staff report. So thank you, Dr. Hill. Any further questions on this item? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. On to item 11D, announcement of the appointment of members of the School Facilities Oversight Committee.
President Ferguson.
Dr. Weisberg.
I move that we, I don't even know how to
Conduct basically the appointment of.
conduct the appointment of members of the School Facilities Oversight Committee, SFOC, as presented.
Okay, moved by Dr. Weisberg, seconded by Ms. Ponser-Kamkar. Would you pull up the staff report here so we can
Right,
do
and
this?
Ms. Quiterio is able to guide us through the
Even
voting
better.
process.
Even better.
So you have three members, Chantal Samponia, Giovanna Waters, and Dakota Hughes. If you can please raise your hand for a vote after I call each name.
Will you make sure you tell us which appointment they're covering? Like, do you know which one's a senior citizen? Which
So this first one is going to be, we only had one applicant for senior citizen, so that's one you just vote on without a vote.
Okay.
Oh, well, it's a vote, but you don't have to. For these are three current alternatives, and so you pick two of the three.
Okay. Right.
And you can pick any two of the three.
So if you could raise your hand, Chantal Samponia.
And this is for the, sorry, I don't have it right in front of me. Thank you. Can we just announce the seat we're voting for first? So that is the senior representative, or
No.
are we moving forward? No, we're not.
For these
Sorry.
three candidates,
Right.
you're going
It's
to
just-
pick two to fill in the vacant seats, and then we'll go to the senior citizen.
Thank you, sorry about that.
Okay.
Got it.
Chantal Samponia, if you could raise your hand if she's one that you. The next one, Giovanna Waters. And Dakota Hughes.
Okay. Sounds like Ms. Giovanna Waters and Dakota Hughes were appointed.
I just want to thank them both. I know them through interactions. I didn't know that they were applying for this, but I know them both through advocacy, and they're two really wonderful people who have long been invested in the district, so it's really exciting to see them here, and I'm really thankful for them for putting themselves out there to do this.
And it has been our practice to usually appoint somebody who isn't appointed as an alternate if they choose. Are we allowed to do that with the number if it's just,
Yeah,
right, but as an ongoing, well, I guess she's continuing
She
on.
would continue to be an alternate.
Okay.
And then for the senior citizen, we had only one applicant.
Right.
So that's Mr. Wiley that
So
met
that's
that
fine.
criteria, so.
Okay. Either way, everybody who participates, and we are talking about the long-term work of this committee, I think is important. And if we don't have bond funds, what the role of this committee is. And I want to be clear on that front as we make these appointments. Because again, a part of the reason why we moved to the governance model is also to minimize the number of committees and minimize the number of subcommittees that we are supporting as a district, and also to streamline the points of access of information. Go to 3 meetings and you can understand what's going on. That should be how it should be, or at least what we could work towards. So I do want to thank all of the members of this committee. Dakota, I think I met for the first time when he came as a parent to that podium, and I think that began for him at Disney Elementary School and beyond, a pathway to engagement that really worked for him. So I just really thank everybody for their willingness to serve. With that, we have all we need on that item, so we will go to item 11E, acceptance of gifts. Ms. Tabbitt?
President Ferguson.
Thank you.
Thank you. As we celebrated the work our PTAs do as volunteers, we also should celebrate and be thankful to all of the generous donations that so many people, including our PTAs, donate to our school sites. And I think we should accept them, and the president should convey his also appreciation for this as well.
Good meander. Anyway, moved by Ms.
Forgot about
Tabbitt,
that.
seconded by, she's like, what was the motion again? And seconded by Dr. Agakanian. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. With that, we do want to take a moment to thank members of the community who have contributed to our educational communities in different ways. To the Burbank Arts and Education Foundation, who has donated $2,000 to be used for DEI classroom libraries at Providencial Elementary School. To the Stevenson PTA, who wishes to donate $3,119.74 to be used for the librarian to run lunch hour program at Stevenson Elementary. To American Online Giving Foundation, who wishes to donate to the district $23.80 to be used for materials and supplies at Providencia. To the Blackbaud Giving Fund, who has donated $250 to be used for materials and supplies at Joaquin Miller Elementary School. To the Arts and Education Foundation, which has donated $500 to be used for classroom tables and chairs at Burroughs High School. And to the Blackbaud Giving Fund, which has donated $576.93 to be used for materials and supplies at Dolores Huerta Middle School. To the Dolores Huerta Middle School ASB, which has donated $10,000 to be used for the VMA choreographer at Dolores Huerta Middle School. To the Jefferson PTA, who wishes to donate, who has donated $75 to be used for the PTA Assembly Untold Stores. To the Washington PTA, who's donated $950 to be used for staff appreciation luncheon at Washington Elementary School. No matter how big or how small, all these gifts truly make a difference. So over the course of the summer, consider giving in different ways, but more than anything, get ready to come back because there's a lot of needs come the fall, or early summer technically, right? Late summer. With that, we will go to the consent calendar. We are voting, or we are being asked to vote on items 12A through 12D. Can I get a motion? 12A through 12AD.
Yeah. President Ferguson,
Dr. Weisberg.
I move that we approve items 12A through 12AD as presented.
Moved by Dr. Weisberg, seconded by Dr. Agkanian to approve items 12A through 12AD. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries 5-0. With that, we'll go to request the address to the board. Any speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. And I have one card for Schlossman.
Mr. Ferguson, I've heard you talk about myburbank.com at a number of meetings, and you seem to be very vindictive. And the way you come across, as you were saying tonight, has he called us? Has he called any of you? You know, the phone works both ways, 2 ways. You can call him too.
No.
And I don't like texting and emailing. You lose a lot of it, a lot of the communication. And our youth suffers from this, and as adults we do too. So my suggestion is to you, quit being vindictive. And you're calling for sanctions. You don't want to allow the photographer, you mentioned him by name, Benson, on the property. You know, you're punishing the kids when you do stuff like that. Kids need to be recognized. My kids all had their picture in the paper one time or another, and it was a big deal for whatever it was they did. So rethink your position and pick up the phone and settle your issue. The guy's name is Sherwood, Craig Sherwood, and he's not too hard to find. Now, you were talking, and I have to apologize, I stepped out of the room. You're talking about some about the First Amendment. And you know, I've talked about this subject more than a dozen times, probably more than anybody. And I think that I'm making a point with you, and then I hear you speak, and I never make a point with you. It goes over your head. And it is not okay, Mr. Ferguson, to pick and choose. You either believe in the First Amendment wholeheartedly, willing to die for it, or you don't. It's that important. That's what our soldiers fight for these amendments. It's America. And we talk about kids, different groups. I wonder, do we have any kids from Turkey attending our district? Because, no, I'm asking a sincere question. I'm not mocking, I'm not doing anything. If there are these kids, we don't recognize them, and they have elections. They have other things that are newsworthy in their country. I read the paper and I see it. And you're recognizing all kind of other groups. I don't want anybody to be left behind. That's all I'm saying. There's no hidden agenda. Some kids aren't vocal, and I'm trying to speak for kids who maybe feel segregated. Regarding school safety, I would support incentives for our employees, not just our teachers, but all of our employees, to become reserve police officers. We need law enforcement. And regarding that, may I have 10 seconds?
No, thank you. Any response from staff?
No response.
Okay, thank you. I will reach out to Mr. Sherwood. Maybe I'll leave him a flyer. Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.